Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link. But prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin. But always make sure your arguments are LPP.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? welcome to another after show here on Logical, Plausible, Probable. Yes, once again, because there's just a never-ending supply of debates to do after shows for over on Standing for Truth. And a lot of people be heading on over from that channel where the one and only SFT himself just got done debating Snake was right on one of the top talking points from the YouTube Evo Atheists, and that is endogenous retroviruses, and are they proof of evolution? So is that a good debate over there? And hopefully we'll just continue the conversation on over here. We'll see where things go and how long we get into it. For those of you coming in for the first time, short overview how we do this. So I got a couple people backstage already. We'll bring them in here in a moment, and they'll each get 45 seconds to a minute or so, share their thoughts about the debate, who won, lost, best one-liners, best comebacks, zingers, etc., etc. And then if nobody else joins, then we'll keep just going to general conversation. But as more people come in, we'll kind of stop what we're doing and let them share their thoughts about the debate, and then we'll go back into the general conversation. And want to give a couple of quick shout outs. See Science Film Labs in the house. Looks like Cram is here. We got, I think I saw Redefined Living a minute ago. Honesty Angels here. What's going on? How are you? And Mr. Greeny, awesome member. Thanks so much, Mr. Greeny, for being here, supporting the channel. Chaser's here. Anyway, this should be a good one. Hopefully, we will keep the dumpster fire under general control, at least for a little while. But then you never know when the flames of just general dialogue will reach such an intense level that we will be unable to avoid the dumpster fire taking over. And at that point, you will know when it happens, when you will begin to see this icon flash on the screen. You'll know we're in full-scale dumpster fire mode, but we'll see if we can make it more than an hour before we get to that. So without further ado, let's get in, bring some people into the stream. First up, we got Brett Keene, the one and only. What's going on, man? How you doing? What do you think about tonight's debate?
Didn't get an opportunity to check out the debate. I mostly came in here because you're an incredibly awesome person. But I will check it out, and I'll get back to you on that.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, Brett, I think you're just, being a ego puffer right now. But I appreciate the nice words. And Dustin Buck is in the house as well. What's up, Dustin? How you doing? Did you get a chance to see the debate, or are you just joining the after show?
No, I got a chance to see the debate. I don't really have an opinion on who won, but I am a little confused about something. When I was listening to the debate, I was formulating a question between, say, inherited traits versus new inherited traits. So we have the ability to see based on the inherited trait of our parents. But alcoholism is like an addiction trait.
Well, some of those, depending on what they are, some of
that,
those are.
Is it me, or it says audio gone out?
A new inherited addiction trait, and where does?
Okay, so Dustin, you cut out there for a second. But I think I followed what you were saying. A lot of things can be epigenetic things get passed down. So, for example, purposes in obesity versus petiteness, right? So, one of the first studies they did on this was in, I think it was from Holland. It was Holland. Post like right around World War II, they started tracking people who, like, there was like a massive food shortage, right, during World War II, and they identified that, let's see, kids that had low, I think it was low nutrients in the third trimester came out relatively normal. If it was in the first 2 trimesters, they had major issue with obesity, and that trait was passed down for the next 3 generations post that. But there wasn't a direct change in their genes. It was modifications it was epigenetic modifications to the expression of them. So it's a little bit different in that context. And there's other variations to that point, but that's one of the things that has to be considered.
Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, I just got confused because they're talking about how androgynous viruses are passed down, but they wouldn't really address what traits they represent. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I didn't hear it.
Well, but, a lot of the endogenous retrovirus functionality isn't necessarily going to be seen as a trait necessarily. It's be regulatory functions or there's different things, but it's not necessarily like, oh, this endogenous retrovirus is like some visible trait that you're seeing, kind of thing.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, but here's one of the things to consider too on this topic is that we don't really know what a lot of them do, and many of these things have just been kind of swept under the rug for decades of well, they're junk, or they don't actually do anything, or it's just some endogenous retroviral element that doesn't really have it's not a big deal for us to pay attention to it. And now they're being unable, as the technology increases, they're being unable to avoid, starting to recognize, oh, wait, it does this. Oh, wait, it does that. This is the outcome for it. And they're discovering more and more things. It's just like all the other topics, right? Of all these other portions of the genome and, non-coding regions and short tandem repeats and all these different things that like, oh, it's junk, it's evidence of bad design, or it's proof of evolution, yada, yada, yada. Oh, wait, we just found out it does X. Oh, wait, turns out you die if you, short tandem repeats, for example. This is why I get so irritated with this, the confidence that we hear from the Evos, right? For decades and right up until now, we've got people running around talking about like short tandem repeats being proof of either, like I said, bad design, a crappy designer, yada, yada, or proof of evolution, right? Well, we now know that there's a plethora of diseases that are caused by slight modifications like shortening or elongating these repeat segments. Like, oh, so this thing that will kill you if it changes, it's junk and has no purpose. Anyway, that kind of stuff just drives me up the wall.
So what's their explanation on why they think something of this subject matter would prove evolution for them? This seems extremely complicated, even if it's true. It seems as though there would need to be some objective purpose or function to it.
Well, one of the things, too, in relation to the similarity of location, right? If it is an element that has function and is purpose and is there for a particular reason, and there's similarity in location among different organisms, like, okay, well, it has a purpose, then it would make sense that it might be in a specific spot, right? If it is actually a retroviral element that's been inserted into the genome, we are now discovering that there's all sorts of clusters and particular regions of that have a proclivity for things like this to show up from a chemical binding perspective, right? So it would also make sense if there is not a preset, but a reason for it to show up there. Then of course it's in the same freaking spot, right? Like we know this, and we also know that there's editing that's done to the genome where our proteins that are running around have functions in our cells. They will slice and dice transposable elements and put them in very specific spots for very specific reasons. So again, going back to my point of like, why is it in a certain spot? Well, the level of precision that we're observing in real time, transposable elements get placed into, cut out of one portion and put into another one. Like we're now being able to observe this in real time, right? So a lot of these assertions about ERVs are dependent on, this random infections, all these kind of things happening versus the precision translocation of elements that we now see in real time. And a lot of especially the internet atheists want to act like either they're unaware of this or they want to deny the significance of it.
It's odd. They're wanting to use all these destructive elements to try to prove something that claims to be a system of order. That's weird.
So do we see these transposed retroviruses in common place with like whales, for example? Does it only stop at monkeys for humans?
Okay, so I'm not following what you're asking.
So we see retro-transposed viruses in monkeys and in humans that are similar. Does that only stay in those two groups? Like, do we see that with other mammals, for example, like say a whale as a mammal?
No, I mean, yeah, there's ERVs all over the place. It's not just in humans. A lot of the comparisons are done between, ERVs and chimps and humans and such, but they're all over the place. And again, as usual, Andrew is missing the point. It's not just about them being in a certain spot in the genome. That's like the lowest, most level of why ERVs are important for common ancestry. Okay, so again, Andrew, I don't have to go into every single aspect of something. That is one, it's a very common talking point that was being addressed, and I was addressing that as one of the positions, and the specific location and the improbability of it being in a similar location was directly from Taylor's opening statement. So that's why I was bringing it up. So maybe
I'll be the first to admit I'm basically a novice at this, but I'm trying to get an understanding, and I appreciate LPP's patience in explaining things.
No, you're welcome, man. Yeah, I mean, these topics, the EVOs are going to operate from a very aggressive level of preceding inference to why something is there, right? And we see similar functions in different organisms that we have determined are descendant from each other. Therefore, this is evidence for why they must have come from, because they had the same things, right? What they refuse to, and people like Andrew, this is why I give him such a hard time about this. If we're operating on software systems, right? If genomes are hardware and software, have incredible levels of computation ability and function, and you're built on a similar framework or the same framework overall with different modifications to it, then what we're observing across different species and all this kind of stuff is not that unreal. It's not unreasonable. Why they think that this is somehow some kind of proof of evolution versus proof of creation, it just cracks me up. And it always goes, and that's why I give Andrew such a hard time. He still doesn't understand the basics of coding. He refuses to go and learn what it is. And not just from a higher level language perspective of like the fundamentals of communication theory. And then wants to run around and thinking that his hierarchies and stuff are proof beyond all doubt of evolution versus utilization of a similar framework, which devs, if you go talk to developers about this, they immediately grasp it. The vast majority of them immediately grasp the point that's being made right now. I'm making right now, and recognize like, oh, well, yeah, of course that would be there. Of course that would be there. Yeah, it would be. Yeah, why wouldn't the architecture be the same? Cool. Yeah, it makes total sense. But people who don't grasp all that are easily brainwashed by the standard talking points of, the Darwinian models that just are so outdated. And I don't know. Anyway.
They, I don't know if some of these people have actually read Descent of Man or some of Darwin's work, but the guy didn't believe evolution was possible without an intelligent mind or consciousness.
Andrew, I've had enough of you. You're just going to be in timeout for a while. You drive me up the wall, dude. I don't even know why you bother coming to these streams. You spew the same bullshit. It's an ongoing, you just to understand, blah, 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 blah. We've gone over this a billion times. You're still making inferences, and you still don't understand the basics of the points that I'm making. So I'm done. Anyways, what's going on with you, Brett? What you been up to?
Just been doing my own thing and dealing with some of the craze that seems to be a daily routine on the internet. But besides that, I'm happy to be here. I'm just drinking some coffee, having a nice cigarette, and learning things as always.
Right on. Oh man, look who's joined us. Bubblegum Gun is in the house. What's up, man? How you doing? You're on mute.
Oh, I was just setting up. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right then. Oh, hey, yeah, that Donnie pretty much demolished in that debate. It was a steamroll, and I think I think Snake pretty much. Did you see that part where like Snake's camera was shaking?
I missed that.
Yeah, you could tell his leg was like going really fast because his camera was like shaking. So I think Snake knows he lost, and he lost real bad. I mean, because I sent a question like, because these ERVs, like, how the heck is a virus just gonna come in and then have the foresight to like eons in the future become necessary and functional? Like how convenient that is. What are the odds? And I know where they're getting this argument from. It's called this channel. Let me look up the channel, but I'll get back to you on the channel.
It's kind of like that DMT thing we were talking about. Remember Logical? Somehow being able to intuitively get in there and have this effect on the body that can't even act as a benefit anyway, because usually the process ends in death.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I just don't understand, why it's so hard for them to really think about what they're convincing themselves is actually plausible, right? Of, oh yeah, it has function now, but it was just adopted, and there was adaptation or utilization of it, and slight modification of this deal to create the new function. Okay, cool. So you're telling me that they just had this hang out for all this time, not doing anything, and then now it does something.
Exactly. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay, so in real time, we observe organisms eject broken portions of genome or things they don't need, right? We watch them in real time eject the genes they don't need. So, and those ones that actually had real function already. So they eject the ones that had function, but they're not using it anymore. But then they kept the stuff that wasn't doing anything. Okay. I don't know if I buy that. What's up, Brandon? Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
What's going on?
So how did you feel about the debate and getting to jump into the mod role? How you did a good job, man. How'd you feel about it?
Oh, I don't know if I did a good job. I wasn't keeping time very well, and I really didn't care how long they went on their little diatribes back and forth in the comments. But they were doing so well with one another back and forth. I had to just kind of let it go,
Yeah, usually those two can. I mean, heck, they've only debated each other like 5 or 6 times at this point.
One thing that maybe Snake's gonna research if they end up debating again, but I felt like the one thing Donnie was looking for over and above all was what he's asked the question, I don't know how many times, but quote, show me the paper where there's an ERV going from non-functional to functional. And again, that it's because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, because evolution
to it. So
yeah, he's basically asking Snake, show me evolution.
Right.
And
exactly.
That argument that Snake got as it's called from this YouTube channel called Stated Clearly, and it's very clear they've been watching you guys because they're using like very sly, that skit. So you're telling me that there's a chance from that movie. I don't know the movie's name.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Dumb
they
and
used
Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber. Oh wait,
Yeah.
hang on. I might. Let's see. Do I still have that clip ready to roll? I think I might. Let me see here. There we go. I think is this what you're referring to?
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah!
Yeah, they used that clip in their video. Clearly, they've been watching you guys, and they're trying to trigger you. Because this is recent. This is from like 2021. I posted the link of that video.
Yeah, logically, you should put the context of what the woman says right before it. That really brings in the punchline. There's not a billion chance that I will ever date you. You mean there's a 1% chance? That really adds to it.
What's up, Sal? How you doing?
Greetings,
my
everyone.
dude.
How you doing tonight?
A little tired. I'm working on a booklet for Dr. Sanford. So
Well,
called me last
Sal,
week.
you don't get to use working on a booklet as an excuse for being tired, because I'm pretty sure that last night you were still going at like 3+ a.m. your time. So I don't think that you get to blame working on the booklet for being fatigued. It's a nice excuse, but yeah.
Yeah, I was up late. Yeah, you're very perceptive, John. I guess I wanted to forget about last night, but I learned a lot, and interacting with Andrew, well, now that you deleted one of his comments or whatever, now I might have to deal with him. Of course,
No,
I'm
no,
quicker on
I
the
didn't delete.
trigger.
I didn't delete. I just put him in timeout for a minute.
Yeah.
Not
But
George says, "Did I miss the dumpster fire?" Appreciate your super chat, George. No, I think the dumpster fire is on the horizon. We'll see.
yeah, with the ERVs, if you just look at the literature 20 years ago compared to today, you know, it's turning around. You know, they were just saying it's junk, it's parasitic. For a lot of the junk DNA, it's totally turned around because of all the medical researchers. Not that you know, it's just amazing that the need for advancing science will just kind of run over evolutionary theory. And so I was just watching the talking points in the side chat from Andrew. I'm just like, yeah, some of this stuff is so obsolete now. It's just getting recycled. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's like there's a barrier to actual appreciation for the latest research in relation to the validity of the standard talking points from the Evo side, right? Of, oh, I accept that they're finding all this stuff, but I'm not going to accept that it, at a minimum weakens foundational premises of evolutionary theory.
Yeah, they don't want to admit they're on the defensive now. I mean, during the 2010s, were like the neckbeards of the skeptic community with amazing atheists, and like the best at that time, the best YouTube had with like these wasn't very good. Like on the creationist side, didn't really have any scientific arguments. But now we got them on the run.
Yeah, and I want to say, you know, it's not because the creationists are leading the charge. It's because the medical community, and so all the creationists have to do is just monitor what's happening, and you know, it's a great thing to see. There, you know, the evolutionists will say stuff, and it won't be too long. They just get embarrassed. So like I've been, the ERVs, for them to be doing what they're doing, they have to have these, like in some systems, they have to have these, what they call crab zinc finger proteins attached to them. It takes foresight. You can't, you know, for it to be functional, it needs another part. And there are lots of connections to make it, you know, it's called like the Cap1 complex. And I've seen so many of these, it's just intricate machines. So, you know, they're saying that this is random or whatever. It's like, I don't think so.
Well, you know something I've been finding very entertaining and supportive of the point you're making, Sal, is we're doing a ridiculous amount of genetic engineering using Cas9, right? Or CRISPR and Cas9 genes, right? Okay. The intricacies and the interdependencies of the Cas genes to make CRISPR editing work is ridiculously complicated, right? There's so many different parts that are working together to enable us to do the engineering that we're doing requires something that is highly engineered itself. And we're taking for like, oh, well, it's not that big a deal because we're being able to do all this stuff. It's like, yeah, that's like saying because we can like etch, your initials inside of your freaking engagement ring diamond, that somehow the laser that's used to pull that off is not that big a deal, and you don't need to figure out how that came to be. Like, and what's the plausibility of like the engraving lasers and all that technology just creating itself? Like, get out of town, man.
I actually had James W. tell me like this argument was like nature has its own science laboratory, and I just have to who's the scientist? It's like you can't have a laboratory without a scientist.
So this is showing, you could see it says here ERV, and then this thing called the crab ZFP is a zinc finger protein, and then this CAP1 complex, and there are all these other machines here. And then what it does is it will, so this complex will look for the ERV here. So the ERV serves as a parking lot for a very complex molecular machine. This molecular machine then will start flipping little bits and bytes, little bits of information here in these little barrel-shaped things. And you see that little barrel-shaped thing is this thing called a histone that the DNA wraps around. And so these are like little codes that are being dynamically changed, flipped on and off. And the ERV is very important to flipping those codes. Those codes then control the regulation of the DNA, whether it expresses or whatever. And this particular diagram is the DNA inside the brain. The brain cells develop differently. So that's one function. That's just one of the functions of the ERV. There's no way that this could be just a random virus being positioned in the right location so that the machines then that are designed to look for it will attach in the right position and start modifying, doing all this computational modification here.
Wait, is that part working like a VHS tape head? That orange part?
Here?
Yeah. Is that like a VHS?
Yeah, it's like it's kind of barrels. It's not exactly barrel shaped, but that's called the histone.
So it works like a VHS head tape?
It looks like a spool. So the DNA wraps around it. So that these wires here, this is the wire that's actually DNA, and part of the DNA has an ERV, and then over here is kind of some regulatory some DNA that's probably used for regulation.
What does that orange part do? Is that like a reader, or what does that do?
It's a memory device. I had a picture of one. Yeah, it's a memory device, and also it helps compact the DNA.
So it does read it. Nice.
Yeah, there's okay. This is this crab ZFP. This is what they call a writer. This machine. So we have readers, writers, and erasers, just like in computation of memory. So the DNA is read-only, is sort of read-only memory. It has a little bit of random access, but then this histone is definitely random access memory. You'll see that in the stem cells handbook. So as the brain is developing, as the brain cells are developing, there's a lot of computation going on with these histones, and that's one role of the ERV. So if you all have any questions about it, I'll just, that's all I have to say.
That's cool. I mean, if it's read only, that means that it cannot be changed. So it's programmed not to be changed. And read only, like, I mean, you all dealt with read only hard drives. You can't change them.
Well, there's a part of the DNA that's changeable. It's called the methylation marks. That is a little bit like random access memory.
Mhm.
But where a lot of the random access memory is in these histones that the DNA wraps around. This will actually have, it's a computational process, and
Well, and they've
LPP
also
would appreciate this. It's Turing complete. Someone did
right.
an analysis of the histone code. It's Turing complete. So these ERVs serve as part of a Turing complete computer. So when I was hearing how Andrew was characterizing this in the side chat, my eyes were just rolling.
Yeah, well, and this goes back to my point, Sal, that I make all the time in relation to Andrew, of he, for coming up on 2 years now, has refused to go and learn the basics of communication theory and the significance of what you're talking about right now, right? And yet claims that all the other what you're talking about right now has no relevance to whether or not their concepts, prove evolution beyond a doubt, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, okay, sure, you want to make that position, go for it, but it doesn't mean that it's not actually relevant and something needs to be addressed.
And like I said, a lot of what he's reciting, and then also his colleagues, it's obsolete stuff. I mean, 20 years ago, that was the understanding, but medical science has moved way forward to this because they just don't care what evolutionary theory has to say. I've often said, if you look at the medical research teams, they have biochemists, they have cell biologists, computational scientists, physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists, electrical engineers. The skill set you don't see needed is evolutionary biologists.
Lol.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get your guys' opinion on something that I caught out of the debate. Donnie a few times was mentioning how some of the ERVs are actually necessary for certain functions to take place. And I think he may have mentioned like embryonic development, that if these ERVs aren't there, the development cannot take place and the organism will not survive. And I think what Snake was trying to say, which I didn't make sense to me, but he's not here to clear that up. Maybe you guys can clear it up and try to steel man his position. But I think what he was saying is that these viruses would enter a host and then somehow get co-opted for this beneficial function that is now necessary for life to exist. To me, that doesn't make sense.
Well, the diagram I showed is why that's ridiculous. The number of components in that right head, you could call it like a right head, is enormous. And so it's just, all that machinery is just going to pop up out of nowhere, and the ERV is going to place itself in the right geometric position on the DNA to facilitate this right process. The right process is going to be participate in this Turing complete machine. That's just an assertion. There's no, that's the thing that really gets under me, is they'll just make these assertions, and the proper counter in a debate like that is, has anyone done the actual probability estimates of how reasonable that is? Or is that just an assertion on your part?
Yeah, because Snake is still presupposing evolution is true. So like all his arguments start with a presupposition that evolution is true. And I mean, that's just not good. And that's what he's saying. Because it's another chicken or egg problem too. Like, which one came first, the host or the ERV?
I think that can springboard into what was I going to say? I can't remember. I'll think of it in a second. I'm going to bring it up.
And I wanted to point out what I showed you with the chromatin modifications. I've talked to some of the, like the slightly previous generation, like say 10, 15 years ago, of biology students that are now professors. They said they never saw that in their textbooks. And some of what I showed is only, is sometimes only used in graduate level textbooks, because it takes a long time before a curriculum learns to adapt to kind of the changing needs. And so it tends to be kind of obsolete. So I don't know if they teach this in undergrad. I had to learn it in graduate school. And so a lot of what Andrew was sharing was just undergraduate viewpoints of how the genome works.
Okay, I remember where I was going with that now. So if you have this additional background knowledge of necessary ERVs in order to sustain the life of any organism, how much support does that remove from what I thought was his biggest argument that he kind of kept pushing, was the fact that these ERVs are in the exact same spots among humans and primates. He really kept going to that. Well, they're in the exact same spots doing the exact same things, and this is just it's too big of a probability for that to happen.
Yeah, that's indicative of design. And
It's-
there are two ways to establish that. If the Earth is young, there's no way that this evolved from a common ancestor. Even Dapper Dino admitted that on my channel.
It's akin to saying, I was gonna say, it's akin to saying like, well, monkeys have fingernails, and so do chimps and gorillas. So replace fingernails with like ERVs, and it's the same argument. It's like, how come they share similar traits? Like, well, similar design.
So you can ask the question why, which is very, very reasonable. And at that point we have to read the mind of the designer a little bit. But oh wow, I agree. It's Sal. I grad 13 years ago in biology, and I didn't learn this. Yeah, so that diagram that I showed. So, but from an empirical standpoint, if the fossil record and life are young, it's a done deal that it's by common design, not common descent. So what are the reasons that God would have done this? Assume, and again, this is now a little bit theological. Why would the creator, God, designer do this? I found out kind of, I think, an answer when I had taken a neuroscience class at the NIH, FEAS graduate school. I had to do a report on a part of a nerve cell called the glutamate receptor. And I worked with a postdoctoral fellow on my, I was to make a class presentation on this. Each of the students had to make a class presentation. I said, how did we study this? He said, oh, we got, these were from embryonic stem cell lines. I think the stem cell line is called HEK. And my heart dropped. That meant that this was from an aborted fetus. And so they're selling the baby parts across the internet for scientific research, human baby parts, like $200-300. And my heart sunk. These creatures that are so similar to us, God has provided a mechanism whereby we can learn about our own biology without having to sacrifice human beings. And I began to thank God every day that there are creatures like mice and rats and chimpanzees that we can use as model organisms to study our own biology. It's just like in the Old Testament where animals were sacrificed for our atonement. It's a picture of the substitutionary death of Jesus Christ. Now it's making sense. And so I'm trying to say now, if the evolutionists ask you, why would God do this? Tell them, you be grateful that he did. Otherwise, it'd be our bodies that have to be mutilated and studied so that we could advance medical science.
Well, I think there's a bigger problem you Christians don't want to address. Let's say tomorrow we convince everybody, hey, evolution's fault. Everybody accepts it. Well, guess what? Guess who's in control of the government? The atheists. And they're just gonna put a gun to your head and say, well, too bad, you're still our prisoner, and you will continue to teach kids evolution, and they're just not gonna give it in. They'll pretend that they're not being nefarious. But what are you gonna do? If you truly want a nation of Christianity, you're gonna have to man up. And look, you don't write the next 10,000 years without brutality and courage. So you're either gonna have to revert to this is gonna get political. At the end of the day, it's gonna get political, and it's either you're gonna have to man up and escape this union, or you're gonna let them continue, submit you under their little union, or and your victory is pointless.
All right. So, real quick sidebar. So, Randolph, I just want to know if you are still holding to the position that one of the primary ways it would be necessary for you to believe that God exists would be for God to grant you omnipotence for 2 weeks. Because I think you wanted omniscience too. I forget which powers, 2 omnis of God you wanted in our debate, but I'm still wondering if that's what's needed, or something that equivalent is what is needed for you to believe that God exists. Because if that's so, then yeah, I guess.
Oh, this is a perfect example of these atheist elitists controlling they control government, they control academia, and they control the media. They will not let you they will not let you have that power. They will continue. And so what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's rather obvious where things are, the trajectory that we're on a global scale. I mean, as we were talking about, this sounded like kind of we're touching base on last night. Like, yeah, I think we're heading directly towards a full scale implosion of the status quo. So we'll see what happens on the other side. Yeah, there we go. So, yep, I was right. So, Randolph just needs to have 2 weeks of omniscience and omnipotence, and that would definitely convince him that the Christian God exists. Oh, man.
Oh my God, the disingenuosity from these people.
Yeah.
They don't want evidence. They just want to keep up the little facade as long as possible, because they want to introduce mutations into the human genome. What do you think they want to push this fat is beautiful, fat is good, fat is evolution? We know fat is a disease, so why do we let them continue as this is good? It's not.
Well, you have to remember, if the stated objective of many of the controlling elites is that we need to eradicate the vast majority of the useless eaters, then, I mean, if they said that's their objective, none of this stuff should surprise you at this point. And yes, Randolph, that was definitely my response. So you want to be God? That's no, actually, I think I said, so you want to be God in order to believe that there is a God. Is what you need. So I don't think that really presents much reasonable expectations of ever being convinced of anything short of, I mean, oh, cool, I'm gonna believe that so-and-so exists if I become so-and-so. Like, that's, yeah, very reasonable ways to consider, to reach conclusions on that one.
Well, actually, there are a few atheists that are kind of in that category that would agree, and you have to kind of draw it out of them. So Paul Kamish came up on my channel. He said, "There's no evidence for God," and I said, "Okay, it depends on how you define evidence." And I said, I can guess a lot of you will just say, "Well, I'd like to have scientific evidence." And I'm like, "Okay, so for you, scientific evidence would be that you could run an experiment and you can demand God to show up, work a miracle, and you'll prescribe it." And I just wanted to point out, okay, so if you can tell God to show up when you want, not when he wants, but when you want, how you want, and how many times you want, then effectively you're God. And is that right? Is at that point you'd be willing to believe when you're effectively God? And I said, there's could be a problem with that. Maybe God doesn't want to cooperate. So what Randolph says explicitly is kind of implicitly what a lot of atheists are effectively saying but won't admit. And I have to kind of sort of draw it out of them. And I said, okay, so if that's where you are, even if it's true, your policy then of whether you're going to believe or not requires something that's pretty much impossible of an all-powerful being. So there's a logical contradiction there that you'll ever believe, given that approach. So
Yeah, I asked Amy Newman this too. Like, what is your criteria for evidence? And she tried to skirt around it. And she's like, oh, it's just scientific fact. Well, I could just say a dog taking a piss on the alley is a fact. That falls within the criteria. They don't want specifics. They don't want to say debunking evolution would be evidence for me. It's sufficient evidence. They can't say.
Well, and the other thing to think about too is like, if science, quote unquote, studies things that are inside of the universe and are subject to the laws of the universe, right? And God is the creator of said rules, but is not bound by them nor contained by them, then you're only going to be able to see the implications of the necessity, not be able to study it itself if the thing you're wanting to study is not inside the frame of reference of what you're studying, then it's not really a rational conclusion to reach that you're going to be able to actually do that. But it doesn't mean that if you have an intellect, that you wouldn't be able to reach inferences, which is why in the context of like my debate with Randolph, it was all about is atheism the what was that exact debate? It was is atheism the rational conclusion of skepticism? I think something to that effect. And it's like, it seems to me that you're having to just operate from the perspective that as a skeptic, you can't ever actually reach a conclusion on anything. And that kind of limits you from a lot of different like relevant considerations. But that's just me.
By the way, I challenged Randolph Richardson to like a debate on modern day debate. He chickened out, just like Jason Thorne. They all chickened out because they know they can't get me with this dumb Kynes argument. They know I'm not a freaking monotheist, so they can't use that freaking little gap, and they're afraid to debate me. All of them.
You tried to. What did you want to debate Jason on?
Evolution. Or God existing. I used God exists, evidence for God. Yeah, that was the title of it.
Well, I want to point out something. So if atheists are demanding, okay, it's perfectly reasonable to ask for evidence. I mean, I've said, God, if he really, he could appear and make himself as evident to our senses as the air we breathe. So I get that. But on the other hand, if one is an atheist, they're forced to have faith in other areas because they don't believe in God. Very simply, they have to decide what's right and wrong for themselves or maybe other people. What criteria do they come up with as far as what's right and wrong or what's true and false except their own whims? And how can they justify that their whims are ultimately right or wrong? So we end up with all these meaningless contradictions, and then they basically adopt faith-based positions that have no evidence, no connection to any evidence. So a simple way of expressing this is, what scientific theory tells you what's right and wrong? How do you decide what to do? What scientific experiment will give you meaning in life, the outcome of it? And because they swear by empiricism and rationalism, and I'll pose that question, and they can't do it. And it's like, okay, so that tells me for a lot of things in your life, you adopt a faith position that actually has no evidence except your whims, which isn't evidence at all. So I'm just showing that, they're not really being consistent when they're demanding evidence for things. They're as faith-based as anyone else. They just don't either realize it or acknowledge it.
Well, and what I find just so fascinating about the, strict materialism folks is, to your point about needing faith, when you go all the way down the rabbit hole regarding our existence, at some point you have to take a leap of faith. Like it's an unavoidable. You have to eventually, even if it's a rational position you're taking, the necessary brute facts at the bottom are exactly that, right? They're brute facts. There's no way around this. Like either we came into existence with no preceding cause, or there's an unmoved mover. Like there's no way around this. That's just, it's one of the two. Either as old Darth always says, either there's the God world and the not God world. It's a dichotomy, and it's either one or the other.
Yeah. and nobody will. Oh, I was just going. Yeah, nobody will answer Darth's questions just straightforward. It's a simple yes or no. Like it's not that difficult.
And on another level, I see a lot of what you call the Evo atheists saying we accept it because it's the consensus view. Where they say, look at all that peer-reviewed literature, and I'm saying, so you're accepting it by faith. Is that right? You don't actually know it for sure yourself. And you're accepting this by faith, just like Dave Farina accepts abiogenesis by faith. And he's like the perfect example. He's like the poster boy of an anti-theist atheist. He'll just accept whatever peer-reviewed thing, no matter how flimsy, if it supports his view. And he'll take on James Tour. I mean, just the levels of self-delusion. It's just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, this reminds me of a quote by an atheist. Here's a quote. I don't care if Americans think we're running the news media, Hollywood, or Wall Street, or the government. I just care that we keep running them. And that's the real sentiment of atheists.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think it's just like the guy I was cracking on last night, right? The guy who identifies as the head of the MIT biology department, right? I mean, I was actually thinking about this. In fairness, I was giving that guy a hard time, but in fairness to him, in the modern era, you are allowed to identify as whatever the heck you want to identify as. So, I just got to give him a pass. He probably has met that guy at one point and was like, I think that I identify as Alan Grossman, head of MIT biology department. I think he's me now. I'm just going to, identify as him. And, it took but he had to get called out on it. And, he finally had to concede of his lying. So I have to give the guy credit. Even though he was identifying as the head, when he woke up and he realized that he wasn't, and he admitted it. So I got to give him some credit on that one. But anyway, what's up, Jamie? Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
I forgot that picture disturbed some people because they think it's like Illuminati or something. Because I have super nearsighted. Oh, not much, man. How are you doing?
Man, I'm just hanging in there. Did you catch the debate, or are you just hopping in the after show?
Part of it. Basically no, unfortunately. I was just resonating with what Sal was saying, even though I'm kind of a troll. Sometimes I was thinking the same way. It's like, can you really take somebody seriously if they clearly don't understand faith, if they think they don't have any faith? If you buy food from the fast food restaurant, you have faith.
Yeah. And these people that claim to be skeptics, it's just like, well, you talk to them long enough and it's like, oh, you'll find out they have some things that are just pure faith and actually sometimes contrary to any fact. it's just they express it differently. For a lot of Christians, really, our faith is in the Christian God. But for the atheist, their faith is in the assumptions that they make about what's right and wrong and true and false. So it's just like you said, they have faith in the fast food. It's not going to kill them. They actually don't know that for sure. And there's trust. There has to be some level of trust there.
Exactly. My grandma drove with 2 feet till she was 86. Did you not know that women out there and men are driving cars like that, and you drive on the same road?
You got a paper for that? You got a peer review paper?
I got a citation for that. My own eyeballs.
Okay, so this is what cracks me up about what we're talking about, right? So, good old Darth, man. Oh, that's Darth Dawkins. He ranted angrily about me for 90 minutes after we had a conversation on Canadian Catholics Discord. He asks black and white formed questions that ignore gray area and nuance. Okay, so Randolph, either God exists or God does not exist, correct? I mean, like, there is no shade of gray. Either God exists or God does not exist. Like, there is a God world or there's not a God world. Like, that's it. There's no way around this. So if you want to operate from the perspective that that's, ignoring, shades of gray and such, I don't know how to address that. Either it is or is not. So,
well, it depends if you're asking about belief, because if it's about what you believe, there is the third position of agnostic, I guess. Is that maybe what's being meant? I don't know.
Right, but that doesn't change the fact that either God exists or God does not exist.
Right. So an agnostic,
it doesn't matter if you haven't reached your end conclusion, like which one you think it is.
Yeah.
It's one or the other.
Yes.
And
back to the matter. Yep.
Right. And the number of atheists that I have heard Darth talk with who insist there's a third option in relation to that dichotomy. It's like either it's a dichotomy or it's not a dichotomy, and either God exists or God does not exist. Period. There's no way around that.
So
whether or not you've reached an opinion, whether or not you've decided on one or the other, doesn't mean that it isn't ultimately it's anyway. It's the same thing with like either the freaking grass is green or the grass is not green. Which one is it? Like, you might be colorblind, therefore you don't have an opinion, but that doesn't change the fact that the grass is freaking green or not green. The sky is blue or the sky is not blue. So it's basic.
True or false.
It's such basic logic, right?
Yeah. Well, what is it that separates this domain? I guess it's the facts domain as opposed to the domain of belief, I suppose, or something like that, right? Because I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, because you know how it gets kind of this. I think they get crossed over in the confusion with lacktheism, that where someone says, "Well, I'm an agnostic atheist." You kind of know what they mean, but like it confuses the matter because in that domain, it's like you have to recognize. I'm not saying I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just mean, you know what I mean. I think I'm not exactly sure how to articulate the reason for that. Do you get what I'm saying, or did that not make any sense?
No, I follow what you're saying. In relation to Darth, I do think he need. I understand why he doesn't give them much rope, but I do think he needs to, or it'd be better if he clarified things a little bit better for some of the folks, because it's very obvious to me anyway. A lot of the atheists that he comes into ends up like kicking off the stage or shutting down. A lot of them are brainwashed idiots. And they're coming into it from, especially the ones that are coming from the lacktheist position.
Oh,
they act like, oh, I'm a lacktheist. I don't have a position. Therefore, I don't have to get into this, God or not God, in terms of the ultimate root foundation. And they're so convinced they can just, cling to the lacktheist position and not have to make a decision about anything, that somehow that negates what reality is. Like my refusal to make a decision, what I think something is, therefore, like I'm refusing to make a decision on this, therefore, whatever I'm not making a decision on doesn't exist. They think that they're freaking like somehow
Yes.
defining reality. It's like,
Was what
sorry,
really drew
you don't get to make that decision.
Yeah.
It operates outside of you.
It's like they watch one video of philosophy and they think they're super clever now.
Well, it's what bugged me about it. It drew me to Steve McRae's rants and stuff about it, is I felt like he was really honest as an unbeliever and arguing about this definition, because these people often that would call themselves like a lacktheist type of thing, what we call that anyway, right? Or they'd call themselves an atheist, but they're really just arguing as a agnostic. But then it's like when they feel like they can get away with it, they'll say how dumb you are for believing in God. But then when they have no argument, they're just like, I just lack belief. So it's just dishonest. It really struck me as like not being honest conversation.
Yeah, they hop between those positions, and you really gotta be specific. So you gotta set up these things, like you gotta ask them what is their criteria and where they really stand. And then they give you like this lacktheist position, like you gotta tell them the lack of a position is not a position, and you cannot debate against nothing. You have to take a position. So you gotta.
Okay, so what do you got? What are you showing us here?
Okay, so
is it? Let me guess. Is this directed at Andrew?
Oh yeah. So you're asking about why I'm tired. I was like, I totally forgot I was up till 3 or whatever, and that I'd worked so hard on this. So let me describe this. This came up also. I was talking about this on my channel today, and Leo and Andrew were there, saying, "Oh, there's absolute proof that space is expanding. The Big Bang's true." And I was pointing out to them, there's, the clocks, what they call time dilation, that we would observe the farther out we look, or supposedly the more redshift we see, that the supernova would appear to be evolving more slowly, like they're in kind of slow motion. And I pointed out someone had done research that you could see this horizontal line here. Okay, what they did is they selected all the points that would support their hypothesis, rejected all the points that would actually falsify it. And Leo and Andrew said, well, there are more papers since that 2009 paper. And I said, did it address this problem that Dr. Crawford pointed out? I mean, if you want to make a theory that there is some, you're trying to prove a point, what you do is you take all the points that agree with your theory and you reject all the others. And Crawford was really smart and said the way that they had framed the problem is circular reasoning. They actually assumed the very thing that they're trying to prove. And so Leo was going ballistic today on my chat saying, there's absolute proof that space is expanding because of this. And I said, Leo, there's no proof that the reason we're seeing the redshift is because the universe is expanding. You can't assert that until you have some experiment that excludes that from other possibilities. And so
yeah, one anomaly would be a defeater, it seems to me.
Well, yeah, there's a saying, thank you, Jamie. There's a saying by Huxley, Darwin's bulldog. He said, one ugly fact can destroy a beautiful theory. And this graph shows all these ugly facts. So Andrew and Leo were citing this, they're citing the studies that basically did this. They just edited out all the other points that would falsify it. They probably didn't do that consciously. But Crawford is really smart that underneath they're assuming the thing they're trying to prove. It's very much like evolutionary theory, where there's a lot of circular reasoning about like common descent and phylogenetic methods. It's like our phylogenetic methods prove that this descended from the other. And I'm like saying, oh, you forgot to say that your phylogenetic methods assume common descent to begin with. So you're only trying to prove something that you already assume is true. And that's not a legitimate proof. That's circular reasoning. And so Leo and Andrew were on my channel insisting. So I just poked Andrew just now. I said, did they specifically address this? So the proper way to refute this, okay, let me show you something. You can put it in the comment section, write an evaluation, show me that you've done the math and you've actually combed through it, and not just quote, please. Show that it's wrong. That would be interesting to see. And I mean, have you read this? Can you do the derivations that Crawford did, and can you show why that's wrong? Are you able to access the databases on your own? Can you show me how you get through the databases, how you pick the points, how you do all the calculations? Because this is like an order of magnitude, like 10 times harder than any biology stuff. So this is the proper way to do an evaluation. And I have to point out, after I ended the show, by the way, I was looking at alternate explanations for the redshift that, regarded the atomic oscillator model. And you and Leo were pretty silent there, but you want explanations, it's right there. You're invited to go through each page of that paper and tell me what was wrong. And then now I found out that there was an experiment where we took light, put it through a plasma, and it got redshifted. Inside space, there is lots of plasma in the interstellar medium. Light going through that is like our experiment. That's very problematic for Big Bang theory. Of course, there's kind of resistance to inconvenient facts, especially when there's a huge
citation to that, if you have one.
What?
I would like to see a paper that demonstrates that, if you have it. I'd be interested in seeing what it says.
It's in the comment section of the video I did today. But the point is, we can actually do experiments. And sure. And I gave you lots of links yesterday. Have you looked at any of them in detail?
Well, that was last night, obviously not.
Okay. So you're certainly welcome to, examine the papers and give your opinion as to why you reject it. I know that's a tall order, but
well, I've done some of the research on that Crawford paper, and
what?
Apparently, as far as I can tell, he seems to have used a statistical method that implicitly factored out the time dilation involved.
No, I think you got it backward. But, we don't need to debate it here. This is why I think the short debate format is not very productive, because it allows Brandolini's law. The long debate format where papers are examined methodically in the evidence and the methods are replicated. I'd be interested in that. And this could be like a year-long project. This is not trivial.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I have yet to see Crawford's data points replicated. In fact, there are papers that show the exact opposite.
Well, I think the data points are right from the Hubble Space Telescope. So I'm just saying this, if you're skeptical and you don't think you can replicate it, that, I respect that. This is not.
I didn't say I was trying to replicate it. I said if other researchers tried to replicate it. Have they replicated it?
There have been 2 others.
Where?
Same conclusions.
Where?
And you can look it up. I mean,
well, you're the one making the claim.
This is
okay, one is right there.
Hang on.
One is right there in the video description.
Hang on. So, Andrew, this is why I basically give you very short rope, because this is the kind you're returning into the epitome of the Evo atheist that I make fun of all the time. Of you present arguments, you guys demand evidence, you demand a paper on XYZ, it gets shown something that contradicts the talking points that you are dogmatic about, and then you demand more without having addressed the first one. And then, I need more citations. Give me some citations. You're pulling a freaking RJ Downard. Let me see the literature that we hear ad nauseum. Okay?
Published literature.
Without actually having addressed the points that are made.
Well,
Because a paper can make a perfectly valid point, it doesn't mean that's correct.
Well, it is
scientific knowledge is based on multiple papers.
Is it empiricism?
I'm not asking for. I'm not trying to convince you. I want you to try to convince me that it's
the universe is expanding.
I'm just trying to tell you. Why don't you try to convince me that he was wrong? I'd be impressed. And at least one of your colleagues does better than what you're doing, and that's Jordan K. I gave him a paper. I said, hey, look at it. Tell me what you think. He came back. He said, I think it's wrong. He spent 8 hours on it. And I told him, I said publicly, I think you did a great job, and I agree with you. Because I liked that paper before he went through the trouble of reading it carefully, going through the math and examining it. It was a paper on nuclear physics, nuclear engineering, which is his field. And I respected him for it. But I'm not here to try to persuade you. I'm trying to find out, the reason I'm putting this out there is I want you to show whether I'm wrong. For my sake.
You're wrong, because we have independent lines of evidence that the universe is expanding.
So this isn't about me trying to persuade you. This isn't about me trying to persuade you. This is about you trying to persuade me that you're right.
Would you like me to provide the evidence then?
Andrew,
well, yeah. Why don't you're obviously demanding that of me, and I keep giving you citations. You haven't gone the extra mile for me. So right now I'm not really impressed with what you have to offer.
So Andrew, are you operating from the position that if, say, like the evidence being drawn from Hubble telescope, for example, if that evidence is not actually substantiating the expansion position, if it's not, and there's actual evidence that would contradict that, are you saying that a huge amount of that's not a huge foundational component of all the other different pieces of the puzzle that you'd be relying upon?
Sounds like it.
Well, I mean, I agree that the expansion of the universe is a foundational component of cosmology. Okay. So no disagreement there. I mean, it is a big observation.
Okay, so if redshift is not actually showing expansion, for the point that Sal was just making about from a experimental perspective, we know that we can get the same type of redshift in the lab via plasma, and there's a ridiculous, nobody disagree. I'm going to operate from the assumption, correct, if I'm incorrect or wrong in this being your position, that there's a whole boatload of plasma out in the cosmos. Would you agree or disagree?
Are you asking me?
No, the other person. Yes, I'm asking you. Is that your position?
Well, yes, the most abundant form of matter in the universe.
Right. Okay, cool. Cool. So there's a ridiculous amount of plasma out there. Okay, so if we have already substantiated in the lab that you can get the exact same redshift running light through plasma, and there's a ridiculous amount of plasma out in the cosmos through which light would have to be passing, right? Is that fair?
I mean, I don't see how that could explain the distance relationship specifically. Okay, you could get redshift.
Hang on. Are we in agreement? I'm trying to like do this in a very slow workup here. Okay, so do you agree or disagree that light that we're observing is going to be passing through plasma?
Probably so.
Okay, so if it's probably passing through plasma,
probably.
if it's probably passing through plasma, then is it extraordinarily likely that redshift would be, we would observe redshift whether the universe is expanding or not, if the light is passing through plasma, if we have substantiated evidence that when light passes through plasma in the lab, we get the same redshift pattern.
Well, yes, but there are two caveats to that. First, the redshift by itself is not the direct evidence that the universe is expanding. And secondly, there are different types of redshift. You can get redshift from gravitational interactions, and those follow different formulas from the cosmological redshift that we're talking here. So we already know that redshift can come from different things. It's the specific pattern of redshift that we do see that confirms the expansion of the universe. So I'm not sure exactly the point you're trying to make here with the plasma redshift, because we know that redshift can come from different sources. That's already known.
No, see, but there are lots of problems now, because if the plasma is causing redshift, that's not accounted for. When I
okay, well, let me ask this. Let me ask this. If the plasma is causing the redshift, could you give a specific mechanism by which it would systematically cause more distant plasma, for example, to have?
I was reading through it today, but then you dropped off in the middle. I was reading through it today with the atomic oscillator model.
Well, I'm asking you to explain it right now.
Again, I'm not here to try to persuade you, because it seems to me you're not interested.
Well, I'm trying to persuade you, but then you're asking me that what I'm saying isn't persuasive.
You're trying to persuade me by just asking me questions. I told you the criteria that would persuade me. Why don't you go through the math of the papers that I provided? Why don't you show where it's wrong? It's going to be a year-long project, but you're not even doing even a few hours. Yesterday, you asked me to explain why I reject the Big Bang in the chat, and I just lost it, because I said I did an hour and 45-minute show on this because it's very complicated, and I was showing all the tables where all these free parameters are. This is not a robust theory. It doesn't have any experiments that can unequivocally show that the various observations are there to the exclusion of other models, like what they call a quote-unquote static universe. So,
well, sure, but it is the best current explanation based on those experiments.
That is not trying to persuade me. I've given you criteria.
I mean, so I can go through the evidence right now, but it seems like you're being kind of hostile here.
Isn't it true that the two ways of measuring the cosmological constant are not aligned?
Yeah.
Well, yes, but that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue from what we're talking about here. That's related to the Hubble constant, not redshift.
Going back, what you were just asking was something that I had actually covered today, and I showed the formulas and on the paper. So, it just doesn't, you're just asking me to repeat stuff that is available to you that I went to great trouble. So when you're saying you're trying to persuading me that you're really not interested in looking at this skeptically, and that's fine. But just don't.
Well, I mean, based on what you've shown me, you haven't given me very good reason to. You've shown me one specific paper, out of other lines of evidence, that's not.
You, Andrew. I'm not here to try to persuade you. You're obviously not persuading me that you have any depth of some of the
literature. You don't seem to want to be persuaded, to be honest.
Wait, what?
I could.
By the way, that's a pretty bad accusation. That's a pretty bad accusation, bud.
Rational pairs.
I took cosmology in grad school. I took quantum mechanics. I took general relativity. I took plasma physics. I took astrophysics. Quite a bit of time to teach me. I'm appreciative of it. And those are the tools now that make me actually skeptical. So that's a high accusation on your part, who is a freshman in biology.
Irrational,
your position on this has no relevance to the issue. There are many other cosmologists who would also disagree with you. my voice here is completely irrelevant to the issue we're talking about, because I can show by what others have said, by the empirical evidence, that you are wrong.
What would be the empirical evidence? Like the smoking gun.
Hey, real quick before we keep being distracted by Andrew, Danny has been being very quiet and very well behaved. What's up, Danny? How you doing?
Hey, how are y'all?
Pretty good.
Just hanging out.
Massive echo.
I have a massive echo.
No, you weren't echoing. It was more like the room you were in was giving a little bit of resonance, not like echo, but
This isn't any better, is it?
that's about the same. You're fine though. It's not bad. You're not echoing. It's just the room. Like there's just not insulation or something on the room, on the walls or something. That's okay.
Yeah, there's not that much here in the room. Do you know what I can do for that? Like, do I just buy something to put over my microphone, or
like one of those sponges, or just get some
small
posters.
little sponge? But I guess I need a bigger one.
Yeah, either that or you can get a couple of pads, like the audio absorption pads. They're really cheap. You just put a couple of them on the walls and it will break up.
Okay.
I mean, you can get those things for like $5 a piece. Just get a couple of them and get them shipped in.
Yeah, I need to fix that. Thanks for letting me know.
Welcome back, Brett. What's going on, man?
Well, what was Danny going to say?
Goodness gracious. Just taking care of some things. Made it back as quick as possible. How you doing?
Oh, hanging in there. I'm guessing you were you over on the did you go check out the other stream that's going on about the ultimate dumpster fire that we're not going to discuss too much, but that craziness?
No, I didn't know there was another dumpster fire going on. Man, that's contagious, like a ERV or something.
Well, there's from what I've been told, there's a full-scale dumpster fire over on Praise's channel right now. But I am categorically refusing to become engaged with that whole level of stupidity. It's just...
Well, what was Danny going to say before we cut him off? I mean, it's tolerable.
I wasn't going to say anything. Was I saying this? I don't know. I don't think I was.
So what do you got, another like 3 weeks left, Danny, before you're on vacay?
Yeah, I have, let's see, 2 weeks of grad school and then about a month more of work. So
nice. Yeah, about a month. How's the year turning out for you?
It's not that bad. I thought everything would be better after COVID, but I don't know. It's just like this weird, awkward like phase in my work that I'm not really. I don't know. It's like, but the good thing is, I think people will stop caring about COVID. You know, at least where I'm at. China hasn't stopped caring, but so I'm kind of sad about that too. The reason why I'm bringing up China is because I was gonna do my wedding celebration because we got married during COVID, so we postponed a celebration or a reception. But now my wife's mother, who lives in China, can't come because China's locked the whole thing down.
Right. Speaking of that, it's really amazing to me that
Asian waifu, nice.
The latest numbers I've heard was that there's around 400 million Chinese people under lockdown right now. And it's like the population of the United States is 330 million. So you're talking about 70 plus million people, greater than the entire population of America, is under forced lockdown right now. It's insane when you really think about it.
Yeah, but it's probably one of those things like they'll say, but it's probably just not enforced. Kind of here like in America.
Like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you've not been seeing the enforcement that's been going on. I
saw that dog with they duct tape a microphone to it, and it's like go back, stay inside. Like somebody's just gonna steal that dog. I would.
Yeah, I don't think them they're killing the animals on the sidewalk, dude.
But are you saying it's like to walk itself, like to
That's-
give it commands?
But that's always been the thing in China. I mean, killing animals on the sidewalk, kind of a Chinese thing.
Sal, I wouldn't recommend going right now for that. It's
okay.
it's all about there's like trust me, there's a lot of you don't want to get involved in that right now.
Okay.
It's not dumpster it's not dumpster fire in the way I joke about dumpster fire. I mean, it's like
Serious.
there's full scale, everybody's calling each other pedophiles, and
Where is
What
this?
channel is this? Sorry, what channel is this?
it's Praise's channel.
Oh,
Listen, I'm getting close. I'm getting tired. So if people want to head on over to that dumpster, they're more than welcome to do so. But I'm not getting involved in that stuff. It's getting. Yeah.
Well, there are only two people I know that know how to really use Streamlabs well. Praise is one of them, and then James Coons. And James is kind of tied up right now. I mean, we're in touch. Oh, actually, James emailed me. He said, "I'd like you to, do you want to debate Aaron Ra?"
Oh man.
Oh, let me debate him.
That's your topic. I said, "How about eukaryotic evolution or protein family evolution?" He wants to debate human evolution. I'm just like, okay, that's not my specialty, but I'm probably going to go in a different direction than he's ever anticipating on this. And so
beware of the time.
It'll be 2 months from now.
Hey, so Sal, are you aware of Aaron Ra coming out of the closet
as a Satanist?
I don't know anything about Aaron.
Oh yeah. So like a month and a half ago, maybe, he has come out of the closet as a Satanist.
Oh, also Bimsy.
And what's so funny about this is his coming out speech at the like Atheist Con or whatever it was, proved beyond all doubt that the vast majority of atheists, at least the type like him, they don't actually think through what they say very often, because the beginning of his speech was on a diatribe about how theists are always accusing him of things that aren't true, and accusing him of being a Satanist and all that kind of stuff. In his speech announcing that he's a Satanist, he was like bashing all the Christians and whatnot who said he was a Satanist. It's like, so you're pissed off that people accused you of being what you're now admitting you are. Right.
He's just not making. This wasn't an April Fool's joke or anything.
No. This is on video. It's on his channel.
It kind of makes sense the way he, dresses himself up. He looks kind of scary.
Yeah. I mean, dealing with the occult does have like physical impact on you. There's a reason, which is get this ugly lookalike stereotype, because once you start dealing with them, they do kind of feed on your soul. And these idiots think that like when they get to hell, that they're gonna have a seat in their kingdom. No, fucking Lucifer or Satan, whatever you want to call him, he hates them too. So he's got to toss them in the pit just as much. Oh, did you know Bimsy also came out as a Satanist, LPP?
Who's that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, he's a Satanist. Bimsy, Bimsy, the guy, the atheist. He comes about here sometimes. He's got like some sort of sailor character or profile picture. Also, who's the other Satanist? Oh yeah, Brain Bug, but he thinks it's symbolic.
Hold on, Brain Bug came out as a Satanist? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he thinks it's symbolic. So he just thinks they're playing around.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know, man. This stuff, let's just be honest. When you go down the rabbit holes, you find people who are either just categorically refusing to be open-minded in their thinking, rather than just limiting themselves to whatever the status quo consensus is, a la Andrew.
Is rational empirics atheist or one of those was theistic evolutionists?
I honestly don't care what you call me.
I mean, are you an atheist or just like an atheist or a Satanist pretending to be an atheist?
I guess I'd lean more towards the standard atheist position.
Okay. Hey, I always run this. I always run this experiment through like atheists. It's like, if you really truly don't believe on this, why don't you use a Ouija board in a haunted place and then tell those spirits to like ravage you? Have you tried that? This is a scientific experiment.
No, I haven't actually bought a Ouija board, so
I mean,
I could try that.
I mean, if you do that and you get what you wanted, by default, by its logic, you have to become a theist, or you're just gonna resort to being a Satanist.
Well, that's a.
Let's ask him. What would you do? What if you did use a Ouija board? Something weird happened that you just in the moment of sheer realization or honesty with yourself, you realize this really happened.
I've seen that with other people, and I know that the power of the situation and suggestion is very powerful.
No. Objects flying about, things pushing you, that is not suggestion. That is something.
Okay, I need to see that because I haven't seen that before, so I need to look into that.
I mean, but let's hypothetically, let's say this happened. You used the Ouija board, something happened like that. Something again. What would you do? Would you admit that theists were right and you were just a useful idiot to the atheists, or would you just revert to Satanism?
I guess I would take the intermediate position and investigate it further.
I think he would not believe no matter what. That's what I think.
Yeah, so you're just gonna keep pushing the can down the road. That's what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I want to get to the bottom of this before I jump to conclusions.
Okay, what if you use the Ouija board and then you get a full-on apparition?
Like what kind of apparition?
A ghost, a shadow person, one of these goat men. It could be anything spiritual.
I guess I'd consider the possibility.
No. What? You just admitted you just pushing the freaking can down the road. There's nothing to satisfy you.
Here's the problem. If you say, well, I'll keep trying it and see if it keeps causing that to happen, then it would just become like a scientific fact that's just cause and effect. But then if it doesn't happen every time, then you can rationalize it away as like some sort of psychosis or whatever, a mental trick, an optical illusion, a moment of whatever.
Well, you're kind of getting at the limitations of the scientific method here.
No, this is part of the scientific method. It's just paranormal scientific. Like once you're trying to contact ghosts, you're not going to use a beaker, a flask, and a little telescope. You're going to use.
I don't think you're.
Well, you're not going to use.
Are you saying like beakers and flasks and laboratory equipment is exclusive to science or entirely necessary to do science?
No, I'm telling you, that's how you're thinking about it. Once you're trying to explore the paranormal, once you're trying to see the paranormal, you have to use paranormal tools. You're not going to use the standard scientific way.
Well, then it's no longer science, is it?
It is scientific. I'm just saying it's not the.
Well, how do you define science in this context?
Replicatable.
Well, many things are replicatable.
A testable prediction. I predict there's ghosts out there. I can test using the Ouija board. I'm not going to touch it, of course, myself. I don't want that shit on me. And I know
testability involves both a prediction about what could happen or what would happen and a prediction about what you would expect not to see. I don't necessarily see how you'd find that with a Ouija board.
Okay, yeah, yes, because I can make a prediction. I can predict if I use a Ouija board, in a haunted place and try to make contact with these things, that the planchette on the Ouija board will move. That's a prediction that will happen.
Well, yes, and I could say, for example, I could come up with a number of hypotheses that
What,
could
the
be
wind?
consistent with the
Dark
results.
part?
That does not mean that the model I come up with is necessarily
What?
correct.
What, the dog farted on the planchette? The wind did it? You sound like one of these NPCs from
No way, you're not listening to him though. He's making a point here.
What was the point? Well, the point is that he can come up with some sort of naturalistic explanation, but there is no naturalistic explanation to
And how do you know that?
Because there's no naturalistic explanation
And
as
how
to
do you
why
know
there's
that?
Do you think there's a
How did
naturalistic?
you a priori come to that conclusion?
Oh, please tell me your naturalistic explanation as to why there's a ghost.
No. I asked you a question.
No,
How did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that conclusion?
Wait. Tell me why this is natural. Tell me why. Do you have an evolutionary theory?
Okay, I have a question for Sal here. It's obviously not going anywhere.
You're trying to avoid this. You don't have a natural. There is no naturalistic.
You're avoiding my question. Is what
What's
you're
your
doing.
question? What's your question?
How did you come to the conclusion that it was not natural?
Because ghosts aren't natural.
How did you come to that conclusion?
Do you think ghosts are natural? Do you think there's an evolutionary theory for ghosts? Do you think they evolved from rocks?
You're conflating evolution with naturalism here. I don't think you should do that.
Because how the heck are you not getting that there's no naturalistic explanation?
Because in order to come to a supernatural explanation, you would need to say, "Oh, I've looked at all natural possibilities and I've excluded them," and that is physically impossible.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, hang on, guys. Before we continue,
this is ridiculous ab absurdum.
Okay, so from a general consensus perspective, do you think the general consensus is that if ghosts exist, they're just natural? And there's nothing supernatural about ghosts? So I'm pretty sure that's the standard position, is that if ghosts are real, then they would be supernatural. What?
Well, I mean, sure.
Okay, cool. So then
that's generally how you define a ghost, but that doesn't necessarily mean that ghosts we know exist.
Okay, so Andrew, if it's generally agreed that if ghosts exist, then they would be supernatural, and then you had an experience with a ghost.
Oh, you're breaking up there. What did you say?
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh.
Maybe it's mine. Hold on.
They don't want evidence. They just want to live in a little bubble.
Hey, real quick. So, hey, Sal, remember our conversation about the, your 600 pounds of rice and such?
Oh yeah.
So I went. So today I went and acquired another 200 pounds. But
so that would be about $200 roughly.
No. It was at Sam's Club. It was $78.
That's a good. Yeah, that's a good price.
Oh yeah, but here's the thing. What blew me away was so I bought some. I think I told you I bought some like more canned chicken and canned tuna and stuff a couple days ago. Anyway, I'm loading up with the rice today, and as I'm walking down the aisle, I see the same chicken and tuna and stuff that I'd gotten 3 days prior. The price had gone up. The chicken had gone up 40%, and the tuna had gone up 15% in the past 3 days. I was like,
he's worse than Carter. How the heck do you outdo Carter? Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, just as a sidebar, we are on a beeline for a food shortage, and inflation is going through the freaking roof. You might want to go buy some food. I'm just saying, and not like stuff that has a short shelf life and is going to be, go bad within the next couple months. Like, you need to go buy some stuff, stick it in a freaking bucket, and hope you never have to eat it. But that's where we're heading. It's bad news bears, and it's not me making this up. Even the freaking president of the United States has said that we're going to have a major food shortage. So this is coming. Don't be an idiot. Go buy some food before the prices go through the freaking roof, because they're already going for the roof.
Thank you for the tip. You know, I have reserves, but I ought to at least take inventory of what I have. I could tell you what I have. I do have a lot of rice. I have canned ham. I have canned chicken, and I have cranberry sauce to make the flavoring good, so that you know you can eat it. I have lots of canned peas and some canned mushrooms. I actually need to do a count. I think I probably have 3 months worth, but you know, I have plenty of rice that'll probably last over a year, but it's the other stuff that I need to add.
Well,
And
so the stuff I looked up, Sal, was that you need about 300 pounds of grains per person per year. So obviously you don't. I mean, you got more than enough rice, but like the it's obviously a mix. Maybe beans, rice, whatever you want to mix in there. But that's just for one person. Freaking 300 pounds is what you need for a year, and that's where you get the veggies and everything else. So you're just talking about what you need in grains, and rice obviously has the longest shelf life. Rice and beans obviously, but I mean, to me, I'm like when I'm looking at the math of just people don't realize that Russia and Ukraine account for 30% of the planet's wheat and corn, like soy and all that kind of production, right? They're the largest exporters on the planet, and neither one of them are exporting. Like, so you've just by default you've taken 30% of the mark, like off the equation, like it's just out, just removed completely. And then when you get into the so I was listening to a report on this. These guys were like freaking out, okay? And they're like, okay, listen, people don't realize this, but if you take fertilizer out of the equation, food production drops by 50% off the top. Like it's like 50% is gone. And they're like, that equates to about 4 billion people starving to death. It's bad. It's real bad. And like, so hopefully it won't go to that extreme, and things will come back to normal to some extent. He's like, but right now, the way things are happening with like Russia is the number one exporter of fertilizer on the planet. Okay. And they have halted all exports of fertilizer. Like it's cut off completely. So when you think about this and Brazil has already talked about this, like the Brazilians are freaking out because they're the number one importer of fertilizer in the world. They basically produce none of their own, right? And they got majority of theirs from Russia, and Russia's now exporting none. So Brazil, population 280 whatever million people, is in like, let's say their food production gets cut by 50%. Like that's freaking nuts. And anyway, I'm not trying to be like a fearmonger here, but like right now we're in the first world and we have the opportunity to acquire things, even if it's just in case. And I'm not saying go out and spend $10,000 on food and store it up for the next 25 years, that kind of stuff. But like getting enough to keep you covered for like a year is not unreasonable, because
absolutely.
Because with the fertilizer problem we're having right now here in the States and not being shipped, like, okay, we're screwing over this year's food supply that's going to be produced in the United States. So as we all know, it takes time for food to grow. So if we've massively hampered food output for 2022, we're talking about end of 2023, best case scenario for the food supply in the United States, production in the United States, get back to normal. We're gonna have to whole nother growth cycle, right? I mean, it's a serious problem.
The only thing sometimes we can get a break we don't anticipate. And, I've been praying. I hope the Republicans just wall up and the Republicans actually start to act like they claim they're acting and stop
Heck
being
no.
rhinos.
They're useful
But-
idiots as much as Democrats.
but-
They're in the same pockets. These people are not your
But
friends.
the point is that there are things that are just out of our control, and sometimes all we could do is look after ourselves. If I did have the money, you're talking about $10,000 buying supplies, I would, because it's a good inflation hedge. My property, the house I own is just I can't believe how much it's just grown just because of inflation.
Well, I think people should buy stock.
Value.
People should buy stock that is related to food, because if they buy food stock, of course the investment will have a return, and that way they can buy the food they invested upon.
Well, it's nice to just have the food there, and because you can eat it, you don't have to worry about the market. So,
well, no, it's a good hedge. Like if you invest in agricultural stock, and if you do see this inflation in food.
Yep. Okay. But hypothetically, right? But think about this: if long tail, you might be correct, but if you have to think about this in any business, right? If your output drops by 50%, there is no way, shape, form, or fashion that your earnings are going to be in a position that's going to increase the stock price. Like, if your output drops 50%, your stock is going to crash.
Fair point.
It's going to implode big time. Now, you might be, if they survive, if you make that company, right, that stock survives and makes it through the cycle and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, maybe. If they end up being one of the few players left, that means okay, that's a possibility. But in the meantime, there's gonna be a guaranteed crash, even if they survive, right? And do you survive in that time frame? is the major question that's got to be asked, right?
Yeah, good point.
I'm really glad you're bringing all this up, because I need to stock up, and I like the idea of canned foods because refrigeration, your freezer could quit, then you're toast, and plus you're using up a lot of electricity, and the freezer's cost. So it's nice to have frozen foods because it's a little bit better than canned sometimes in terms of the taste. But so I related my inventory of peas. Oh, I have lots of canned fruits. Well,
that's good.
And
those usually have like a 2 to 3 year shelf life, I think.
Yes, it's interesting. I should keep track of which things preserve. Oh, the other thing is I like mashed potatoes because they're easier to cook than rice.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now shelf life's not quite as good, but you can get a pretty good survival time out of those. I got a couple boxes, like big old boxes of that.
Well, I think the stream is dying, so I'm just gonna hop out, I think.
Oh, okay. Nice to see you.
All right, later. So actually, I'm really glad now that's just you and me, LPP. Because we're talking business. I had a nice conversation with Rebecca, and it echoes some things you and I had talked about. I'm thinking about trying to start a side business publishing, because people have been requesting me to teach courses or write books. And so I'm going to be working on a booklet project, say 20, 30 page booklets. The difficulty of Rebecca wrote a 140 page book, and I'm just like the complexity increases the bigger your project, because your earlier chapters have to be coherent to your later ones. And so you had suggested writing booklets, and so now I'm going to be exploring that. So the challenge now is how to market and just get people to know. I got to tell you something, and not that I was snooping to do anything totally nefarious. Well, no, maybe I was. I looked at the 990s of some of these nonprofits, like Kent Hovind, Dinosaur Adventureland, and his son Eric,
$500,000 of revenue a year. And I'm like, what are you guys putting out? I mean, they're basically entertainment outlets, but there could be other nonprofits that are like in the homeschool market. I'm just throwing those numbers out at you.
Well, those numbers are actually pretty low. You have to think about like Answers in Genesis is 60 million a year. I want to say Reasons to Believe was like 6.5. Discovery Institute's 9 and some change, I believe, million. So it's I'm not sure what ICR is. I didn't look up those other ones, but
ICR is about 10 million and CMI is 2 million. CMI is considered one of the 3 big ones, but it's more of a reputational thing because they're dwarfed by Answers in Genesis. I mean, 60 million versus 2.
Right. But those kind of things would be, the reason I say this is like 500K from an individual perspective seems like a lot of money, but it depends on what the expenses are too, right? And I would assume there's a decent amount of operating costs with Dinosaur Adventureland, just as an example, right? Just like with your Answers in Genesis, I would assume they have a decent amount of overhead with the Ark Park and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, as you've heard me go on tangents before, like I do really wonder how in the heck these groups with giant sums of money and not huge numbers of employees, right? I really do wonder why they're not more aggressive on the marketing side. And they're spreading the word, but not in as aggressive manner as could be done with a very, you drop, $50,000 is a relatively small marketing budget from a business perspective, but that's nothing if you have an overall $9 million in revenue, most businesses are going to spend at least 10% on their marketing budget, right? So that would be a 900. Let's say
I actually didn't know that. You've given me a data point.
Okay. Oh yeah. Most businesses are going to spend at least 10% of their revenue on marketing.
By the way, I found an interesting data point. The cereal industry, the cold cereals like Kellogg's or whatever. And this is like 20, 30 years old data, but it's the one time I found it. They said their marketing budget's 50% of their revenues, 50% to be able to maintain market dominance. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Well, especially now with the splintering of media, right? So rewind pre-internet and even pre like cable, and you've got CBS, ABC, NBC. What was it? Fox, I guess. But like they controlled, the Walter Cronkite's, for example, he was getting 40, 50 million people would watch every night. Now the number one news channel is Fox, right? And Tucker Carlson's number one, and he's getting like 2 to 3 million.
Yeah.
Right. So it's splintered big time. He's the number one in news, but it's only 2 to 3 million, like 2.3 million or something like that, right? And then you look at CNN, and CNN's their number one primetime people are getting like 500,000. It's bad. It's so bad. MSNBC, that's why it cracks me up about the level of credibility and just like the way these people are being worshipped. It's like, you guys do realize that podcasters who are not famous at all are getting more downloads per episode than Joe whoever, insert name, Brian Seltzer or whatever, is getting on CNN, the worldwide leader in news, right? Like, okay, cool, dude, you got like 300,000 people that watched you, okay, and you got people, and that's why it cracks me up when they like go off on like Joe Rogan and stuff. Rogan's getting like 4 or 5 million downloads an episode, okay?
I know.
And these guys are getting like 300,000, and they're acting like they're the superior ones, and he's somehow inferior. And it's like, I would say by definition, his ratings, quote unquote, are way better than yours. You guys are punks, and you're whiners that you're sad that he's whooping that ass. Is basically what's going on, right? And same thing with like it cracks me up by like Alex Jones, right, on Infowars. So Alex Jones has like 4 or 5 million people listen to him. So he's actually bigger in terms of the viewership or listenership than CNN and NBC combined. But then they act like he's the outlier who is nobody's listening to. It's like, you guys are mixed again, flipping the data here. But anyway.
Oh no, you're pointing out something interesting, and as you just quoted those numbers, I just thought like, well, Erica, our mutual friend Erica Gutzik-Gibbon, she's getting like 100 or 200,000 views on her videos now. She's just dominating. I mean, she's getting up there. You know, she would some of her best ones would outdo some of the CNN shows. And but I wanted to say something before I forgot. I meant to tell you, I've seen a disconcerting trend. It's not altogether surprising. There's deplatforming in the Google search engines.
Oh yeah.
So when I type in Russia, Ukraine, it just has the New York Times, CNN, and Al Jazeera. And I have to go way, 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 way down to find the Fox News or any conservative outlet that's going to be talking about the Russia-Ukraine war from better journalistic perspective than the New York Times or Washington Post or Al Jazeera.
Well, here's all I have to say about the Ukraine deal. Is the current president of Ukraine literally was the star of a TV show about an actor who becomes president before he became president. So, I mean, like, you can't make this up, okay? You cannot make this up. And the fact that it is, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but like the United States has admitted that in 2014, the CIA and our deep state facilitated the overthrow of the Ukrainian government. And we basically facilitated the victory of whatever the guy's name was who replaced him. And then we also admitted that we orchestrated the current president winning. So it's like, oh, and by the way, it's been admitted that there's a whole boatload of U.S. CIA and former Pentagon assets who are now quote unquote retired and no longer quote working for the United States government happen to just be all over Ukraine right now. And it's also been reported that the American assets are running the Ukrainian military. So it's like, what's going on over there, man? Like, this is you're talking about taking out proxy war to a whole nother level. And
there's been kind of the suspicion that the U.S. assets are being used to direct and control. Say, hey, go over there. You know, there's your target. We'll give you the GPS coordinates. You know, that's within our capability. And what I heard was Russia had their GPS shut off. That's why I was shocked to hear that there were reports that the Russian units were lost. How could they do that in the era of GPS? Well, they were getting their GPS from the Allies. And I'm just like, okay, if you want to prosecute a war, you better figure out how to navigate. I mean, there's just like levels of incompetence. And it was really funny that I heard that, they're talking on open radio, unencrypted radio. They're even, and the Ukrainians were just listening in. So it's like, oh, thanks for telling us your position.
Yeah, there's something very strange is going on with that whole deal, in my opinion. I mean, when you look at the moves being made and on both sides, and then okay, so I don't know if you've been following the asset seizure that's happening to all these like Russian citizens all over the place, but they're like but they've been seizing people's like houses and stuff, and in Italy and France and Spain, the United Kingdom. Also, I mean, think about this. What would the response be if any other country started seizing, so and so's mansion because of the war in Afghanistan, right, or the Iraq wars or whatever, like any of that stuff, and then other countries started seizing, Bill Gates's we own stuff all over the place, right? They seized his house in France, they seized his yacht in, Italy, and all this like what would the response of the United States be?
Yeah,
I guarantee you, we would be flipping out and be real pissed if that was starting happening to our citizens, right? Well, that's exactly what's being done to Russians. And I'm like, whether or not you agree, I'm not saying you have to support Putin's moves by any stretch of the imagination, but you're literally seizing the assets of private citizens who are not like they're not military assets.
You're seizing. Point. Yep. I had that kind of feeling, and I said, there's a certain sense you're taking this. This is opportunistic. This is thievery. You're using it. You're using the war as an excuse.
Well, and not only that, and the point, the thievery word you just use, and what I'm about to say is an even more sinister level. So Russia got cut off from SWIFT, which is like the bank transfer system, right? So they've been cut out of that, and they recently they had $600 and something billion frozen. And then they have refused to. They've been cut off from being able to do currency trades, right? So Russia is about to default on debt, not because they don't have the money, but because they not only have their assets frozen, they're not being allowed to trade rubles for dollars to pay their debt. So we're getting ready to default a country by refusing to let them pay you. I mean, think about that. Think about it from the context of, I loan you $100. Or no, I own you. I lend you £100 and say that you have to pay me back in pounds. You only have dollars. You go to the bank and they say, no, you cannot. We will not give you pounds. We will not trade your dollars for pounds. And then I'm like, and then you come to me and be like, hey, can I give you dollars instead of pounds? Because they won't let me do it. No, no. No, you have to pay me in pounds. And then the time passes, and then I serve you with a lawsuit to pay me. And you're like, we go to court, and it's like, hey, I tried to pay them in dollars because they wouldn't give me pounds. How am I defaulted? Like, what do you mean? I tried to pay you, and that's what we're running into right now. And then it's just, so what are you going to do? You're going to start seizing additional assets of the government of Russia, and say, oh, you defaulted on this, we're seizing X. I mean, I'm sorry. In that context, I'm probably going to pull my gun out and shoot your ass if you try to sit here and tell me that I haven't tried to pay you, and then try to take me to lawsuit. Anyway, it's like,
and I just realized as you're describing this, I've wondered why not. I mean, if the allies here, NATO, were really interested in supporting the Ukrainians, they could be delivering a lot more arms. And I was thinking, you know what? I've suspected there's a reason that they actually want to slow the war down and let it drag on. And now you're kind of giving incentives for some certain parties to. This is a great situation for certain greedy parties that the war drags on, because then they could hold on to the assets a little longer. And the longer you hold on to it, you can start to.
Well, here's the other thing. Not only, I agree with you 100%. They want to drag the war. I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but they've already been talking about like, oh, the Ukraine-Russia war will drag on for years. They've already been talking about that, right? And it's like, okay. So number one, I don't think that's true. I mean, like, insurgency war might, and guerrilla warfare might continue, but there's no way that this conventional war is going to last for years. Like, there's not a chance. But in relation to the the big world, the big game picture or big picture game, right? If your objective is to collapse current civilization and redo the whole build back better in under the Great Reset and do a total, restructuring and implementation of global government, right? This is why I'm not sure what the deal is with Putin on this move, right? Because the cutting off of the export of fertilizer, the shutdown of exports of grain, those that kind of things, like you're guaranteed to have a economic implosion on a global scale, because historically when food costs reaches 50% of income, you have riots. Like, it's guaranteed, right? So, like, 100% guaranteed. Well, we're like here in the United States right now, we're on a trajectory for the price of food to have doubled by the end of the year. So we wouldn't necessarily quite be at 50% of income, but be getting close, right? For the average person. People forget about this. Like, the average dual income household in the United States is $67K, right? But the average person is only making, the average individual income is like $30,000, right? So people are losing jobs. People have burned, if they had any savings, vast majority of people have burned through them. Now they're on credit card. They've maxed out their credit card debt. I mean, there's a report that just came out a week and a half ago that, which is something I predicted last year. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah. People are like, oh no, credit card debt is not bad. Everything is fine. People are looking great. People have been saving money. And I'm like, what world are you freaking idiots living in? Like, people burned through their savings in 2020 and they started using their credit cards when all the unemployment bonuses ended in August of last year. Right. So that's when all the extra money stopped. Like the federal bonuses and all that kind of stuff went away. And then we went into Christmas and people bought stuff for Christmas. And then January rolls over, and then when the February reports come out on credit card debt, guess what had happened? Oh, credit card debt had skyrocketed. It's like, no shit. What did you think was going to happen? All the extra free money, quote unquote, free money they were getting from the government stopped. Their jobs sucked. Inflation is going through the roof. And the wage increases are not keeping up with inflation at all. And like the last report I saw was that with inflation as it currently stands, it's the equivalent of a $5,600 reduction in income. So, like, that's a big freaking deal for the average Joe, who's especially, I think it's 80 something. I forget the exact number. It's 80 something percent of people live paycheck to paycheck. So
it's terrible.
Like, if you're already living paycheck to paycheck before all of this inflation, and then you have all of these costs go through the roof, why would you think that people are not going to be like burning through whatever little they have left and starting to use credit cards? And then if food prices double before the end of the year, we're in deep doo-doo at that point.
We're already, honestly, John, I'm surprised we're having it as good as we're having it now. I really thought even economic collapse 7 years ago. So, I just honestly, I just think it's by the grace of God we're hanging in there, because it looks so bad, structurally. So I can, at this point, I can only pray, because, by the way, just wanted to point this out. I've noticed that atheism grows in prosperous times.
Mm-hmm.
People just start to feel like they don't need the Lord, that they can do it. They've got it figured out, until they realize that they don't. And unfortunately, sometimes if it's a good religion, they'll turn to, if they find the Lord, that's the good religion. But then you end up like, you have situations like Venezuela and North Korea, where enough people will adopt the religion of a certain tyrant and follow after him. And it's just suicide for the country long term.
Well, no, that's a very good point. And to your point on the fact that we've survived this long, because I agree with you on we've been living on borrowed time, and I've said it for quite some time now that the Trump presidency was a temporary timeout on the heading to the end of the world, because if he hadn't been president, the collapse would have already happened. Because
we would have had Hillary. Oh,
right,
goodness.
Hillary would have just accelerated all this stuff. I mean, because you think about the minimal amount of things that Trump was able to block, and it still got worse. And he was actively working against a lot of their policy positions. So if Clinton had been in office, I mean, good gravy. I can only imagine how accelerated this. We would have had a not quite as senile as Joe Biden in the White House. I mean,
and look at the other alternative. Yeah, they had Bernie Sanders. Oh my goodness.
Oh, by the way, sidebar. Did you see Joe Biden with the Easter bunny, over the weekend?
I didn't see that.
Oh my god. Okay, it's worthwhile to see. Okay, so apparently it seemed I this isn't 100%, but it very much seemed that the senile and commander in chief, he has all his handlers and stuff, his people like keep him from walking off the cliff, right? Well, it really seems like maybe it was a handler, maybe it was a Secret Service agent, I don't know, was dressed up as a freaking Easter bunny. And because the president Biden kept doing weird stuff, and the person dressed up as the Easter bunny would run over and be like, no, Mr. President, this way. It was like directing the president. and it's on video, okay? And I mean, it's like, man, we have jumped the freaking shark if the Easter bunny is now the handler of the president of the United States. I mean, it's like you can't even make this stuff up at this point. And it goes back to the day I watched. You guys remember? You remember during the primary? Did you ever see him when the freaking geese walked behind the window in the middle of his interview? Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, so you know how Biden basically spends all of his time in both in his campaign and now, actually, but he spends the majority of his time in Delaware at his house, right? Well, during the campaign, he did almost all of his interviews in his basement or something. It has like windows, like you could see out into the yard. And anyway, during one of his interviews, some geese you can see him in the background, like walking through behind outside, like you see it through the window, and the windows are open. Well, he hears them like making their noise, and he turns around. He's like, "Oh!" In the middle of an interview on live TV, he like turns around. He's like, "Oh, look at that! We got geese." In the middle of an interview, okay, on live TV, like MSNBC, anyway, and there's like hard cut technical issues pops up on. They like kiboshed it, technical issues on the screen, and then another one. He again in the middle of a live interview, he like stops looking at the camera and just kind of looks off to the left, and then walks out of the camera view while he's in the middle of an interview. And then like you see one of his handlers like run across, and then like you see and then like shut off the camera. So he's in the middle of a live interview and just walks off. I mean, it's like you can't. Okay, and then you get into like after being president. Did you see him fall asleep at the G20?
No.
Oh yeah. So Joe Biden at the G20 at a conference table falls asleep. So like all the other presidents and prime ministers and stuff of the other country, the G20 countries are all like sitting around doing their thing. Joe Biden is asleep. He's literally dozed off. I mean, it's like, it's so bad. It's like the grandpa has fallen asleep here.
Well, of course, the one thing I remember is him climbing up on the ladder to the stairs to Air Force One and tripping 3 times.
Oh man, that was bad. That was so bad.
But really, more on a practical level, how do you feel your channel is doing? Is in because I'm not I mean, going back to that model of, Eric Hovind and the $400,000 he, I am really looking, because I'll tell you why, because I actually really love, writing things and doing teaching, and I want to go more into that. And I don't know if you're interested in doing that at all. For yourself. So I was just kind of comparing notes.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see you being much more proficient for sure in the teaching aspect and the writing aspect for sure. I mean, you have much higher level of education and knowledge and experience, and you're doing things in the real professionally in that arena. So obviously you have the background and the knowledge base and the access to the data that's be necessary for that. And as I've talked about before, man, I know you want to kind of target, if I remember correctly, you're wanting to target like high school and kids going into college, right? That are kind of in that stage, doing a little bit of higher level stuff, not just the surface level stuff, more the more detailed stuff, right?
Well, it's one of those things. It's like, I have my skill sets, and I'm just trying to match it to a certain product, so to speak. And I think your suggestion of book, our mutual friend Rebecca, Rebecca Davis.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
She's saying, Sal, just start writing books, and it's like, John Maddox kind of said the same thing, and he said booklets, and I said, yeah, well, that's kind of a smaller entry level, at least for me to kind of go through the quote unquote manufacturing process, because that does seem to be like the start. Whenever you have a book, then that starts to establish your brand name somehow, and you start to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you also have to remember that as your first book might not be super successful. It might be, but it might also be a much, smaller level of success. But for easy math purposes, let's say your first one gets you 100 customers, but it's only 30 pages, right? For you, that's not an extraordinarily, that's not a major undertaking for you to write 30 pages on something, right? So let's say first we get you 100, but then your second one, you get 75 of the first 100, get your second book. And then you also get a new 100. So now you're at 200 totals that have bought your book. And now let's say on your next one, you get 150 of the 200, right? But then you get also another 100. So it's like from a cascade perspective, it's all about building up the list, if you will, of people who are interested. So now, maybe it takes you 4 or 5, but now after your fifth one, you're going to be selling, let's say 1,000 copies of your next one.
Yeah.
It gives you a huge opportunity to begin to create this cascade, as well as to be able to, at that point, utilize the books as both the revenue source as well as a marketing mechanism, right? So then let's say now you say you can have the book, let's say you create a little like online class that goes into greater detail about what is covered in the book, right? So you have a 30-page book that is kind of the primer for a more comprehensive online class, right? And now you can create an additional cascade, and this goes back into freezy math. Let's say you get to where you're getting 1,000 people. You have 1,000 people that buy your new books, right? And of that, you get 50 that sign up for the class, right? But that class is just for easy math purposes, say it's a $50 price point. Well, you just made $2,500, right? As well as creating a much greater brand connection with those customers, because obviously they go through and do an entire class with you. That's a much more direct connection, right? They're reading your books, but now they're like actually interacting with you on a much deeper level, going in a much more expansive level on whatever the topic is, right? So that kind of stuff, you can sort of create another type of cascade, and eventually, and I say eventually, it doesn't have to be that long of a period of time, but now you could look into, how am I marketing? Am I doing much more direct marketing now, right? So I've created my marketing outlet, which is much more focused on your time, right, and your knowledge for creating the booklets initially, right? Now you're creating your initial customer base. So could you have acquired those same number of people from other advertising models? Probably, but maybe much more cost associated with it, and you'd have to do more A/B testing to figure out how you're going to reach those demographics. Versus if people are buying a book on one of these topics, they have an interest in it already, right? So you've already created a hyper-targeted demographic model. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. And there's something you said that just piqued my interest, is the book can actually be a marketing tool. Because I was just realizing, people see it on the bookshelves or they're talking to their friends, and it's a little more tangible than saying, go visit Sal's YouTube channel. They got this book that was really helpful for them. And that's very interesting. You said it could be a marketing tool. I might actually look at it as that yeah, it initially is a revenue source, but it is a marketing tool to get the online courses. And nowadays, with schools going down the tubes, public schools, there is a need for some sort of online component. And they said one way you could reduce the cost of the classes per individual, but then you have just kind of you teach classes rather than one-on-one. It lowers the barriers. And so I might explore that. So at least I have kind of like, it's what they say in business, you do a little bit of test marketing of your ideas. So I'm kind of in the test marketing phase of getting the book out. And really, honestly, I do feel like I have some pretty good cutting edge creation science stuff. Just like what I told you today about the plasma stuff. And then like the other day about like the low energy nuclear reactions, there are not any creationists that talk about this. So there are some things that I can bring to the table that are really new arguments that I think are good. And the gauge of that is, that's why I have people from the other side like Dr. Dan come on my channel. People don't understand. It's like, no, I'm not here to win a debate. He's actually giving me good time. Investment of time, his own time, to say, hey, Sal, don't do that. That's not, that wouldn't fly in my class. And I'm like, okay, you and I disagree on this, but I know if you say that's a no-no, it's like, okay, if I could fix it, I'll fix it. Like one time I was trying to show a diagram in a book I was thinking about writing, and he said, no, don't use that, Sal. That's obsolete. Why don't you use this diagram? Because this is the diagram I use in my own class. So I was very, very grateful for that. I got free editorial review.
Right.
Did you get my email, Sal?
A
few days ago, maybe.
I don't think so. I'm really sorry.
It's okay. It's just from Jamie Russell, and it's just a link. I didn't even type anything. I just thought of you when I was watching this cool channel, and for some reason I just felt compelled to send it. But it was about transmutation of nuclear elements or whatever, and it was.
Oh, thank you.
And it wasn't like a technical thing, but it's a really intelligent guy that has a channel that's really interesting channel. It's based off of peer-reviewed work, in the literature, but it's about science and future technology, cosmology, and those types of subjects. And he talks about stuff in philosophy too, is regarding like, potential future, technology, like, space stuff, it's kind of dorky, but it's really well made and it's got good information in it. And then, so that was a really neat one. And he goes into a lot of the science actually, like with the island of stability and the different, is interesting. But
I'll look at it. I just wrapping up for John. Thanks for your pointers there. I'm gonna try to eke out time to do exactly as you suggested. To
Well, and
work
something
on the
else.
booklet. This
And
you
something
you
else.
told me this like 2 years ago, and I never got around to it. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, and something else to think about too is the from the course perspective is there's platforms now that you can very easily create a online course, right? And they've got the question, the quizzes built, the quiz technology built in. So you just insert the questions and the appropriate answers, and you can have tests, and you can have insert video clips and all that kind of stuff into them, right?
like
And
Mighty Networks, stuff like that.
right, and then you have a class, you have a literal class, right? But then it can be a monetizable one or it can be free or monetizable, right? And but it removes the, you have to create on the front end, right? But you're not necessarily having to quote unquote teach the class every time. You're teaching the class, but you're not having to teach it in real time every time, right? So it's a scalable concept. And this goes back to my point about the cascade effect, right? So book 1 gets you 100, book 2, now you're at 150, so on and so forth. The same logic can apply to the courses, right? So you only got 10 people in your first course, but they love, well, that's for easy math. You got 20 from your first course, but 10 of them loved it so much that when your next one comes out, you get those 10 plus another 20, right? And you look as that scales out, you now have a mechanism that can be A, a revenue generator, and B, a very valuable resource for people. And then C, you've got you're building your own marketing tool, right? From a word of mouth perspective of, oh man, have you seen this? I took this class that Sal put together. Are you familiar with Evidence and Reasons? The great content, awesome classes, et cetera, et cetera. And oh yeah, they got a new one coming out soon. And now you'll be able to create that fear of loss of not finding out the next one,
And I got to tell you, it does surprise me, some of the people that are very successful teaching religious stuff. Because one, not that I'm doing this for the money, but it does bother me. You get clowns like Jim Baker, and just like, how do you do this? You have no personality. The stuff that comes out of your mouth is garbage, and yet millions of people listen to you. And just like, how do you do it? Of course, there's lots of lying and charlatanism.
Yeah, there's that.
I'm just like, gosh, and so I want to give a product that will really give people good religious teaching too, so
well, and so I think that
all I can say is I'm going to try. I'm going to just try. I'll try my hand at it, see where it goes.
Well, I think you should. And the other thing to think about too is, and just put in the back of your head, is your first try doesn't have to be awesome. Right? That's one of the things, I'm sure you've heard this saying about the whole aspect of fake it till you make it. That's a fundamental concept in
use it or lose it too.
Well, there's that too, but the fake it till you make it thing is a fundamental principle in entrepreneurship, startups, all that kind of stuff, right? The fake it till you make it is it's not that you're lying, it's that you just are willing to mentally operate from the perspective that you're visualizing your success and the fact that you're going to achieve X, and not operate from this, oh, I can't do this, or I don't know if I can, or what if I'm not as good as I want to be in the future? It's no, I'm going to operate from the perspective that even if I'm not at the stage I ultimately want to be right now, I'm going to conduct everything from the perspective that I'm already there. And so like in the context of, I use myself as an example, right? So in the context of when I was building my company, right? It was me and another guy. That's how we started off, right? And I had because we didn't have a freaking office initially, guess what? I never had a meeting with a client at my office because I didn't have a freaking office, right? So it'd be like, oh, we can come down and see you. Oh, no. I'm happy to come to you. I got no problem No, I can work around your schedule. I'm happy. Let's make it easier for you. I can drive into. I'll be in that part of town. I got no problem swinging by and sitting down in your office. That'll be easier for you. Oh, okay, that'll work. So guess what? For the first year, I never had a meeting with a client that wasn't either at a third-party location or at their office, right? But I closed the deals. And anyway, my point is that when you're going out and doing this stuff, it's like if you create something and it's and the content you put out and is true, right? It doesn't matter if it's not everything that you wish it could be, whether or not you have created something that has a value proposition. And are you being able to provide information that other people don't have that is valuable? And the answer to that question is already answered. That question is already answered. You do have information that's valuable and that other people either don't have access to or are unaware of, which is the same thing, right? And that's what you need, because in the era in which we live, what is it? What are people getting? What are people searching for? They're looking for answers to questions they may not even know they have yet, but are looking for those sources. And that's what it boils down to. And anyway.
Well, let me just, before I don't mean to monopolize your time, and I'm very grateful for your pointers. I have to consider this. The two booklet projects are already kind of well defined. Dr. Sanford wrote me last week. He said, "Hey Sal, we actually had a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor when we submitted our Springer Nature publication chapter." And he said, "Why don't you assemble it and we can make an essay, we'll send it to the ICR." And then today I just wrote him, I said, why don't I write a booklet? And by the way, this would augment genetic entropy. So this actually might be kind of like a genetic entropy 2.0 booklet.
Oh, that's cool.
A very nice summary of genetic entropy, kind of just at an accessible level, because some of the quotes are just written by evolutionists themselves. It's going to be so easy to make the case now. When he made the case in 2005, it was very theoretical. But how evolutionists have a way now that when they can't deny the obvious, they finally admit it. And it's like, okay, you've made the case for me. And that's what he wanted me to do. And I said, this could be like a nice 20, 30-page booklet. And then the next project would be like Cures for Doubting Thomas. It talks about how I went through, my season of doubt, and the study of science, and particularly biology, brought me back. And kind of that process, because a lot of churches don't really deal with the doubters in their churches. They're either bullied or sometimes they go through mental gymnastics to stay there. And actually the churches ended up being really good atheist factories, because some of the atheists you meet on the net, they were just bullied in church, and they said, this is the word of God, you believe it, or take a hike, and they take a hike.
No, that's a very good point. And I think something else to think about too, in line with where your train of thought is, what is that? Let's see here. There's a book. So the Armin Navabi, Why There Is No God book, right? This is, I've read this thing. It's so bad, but it's, I want to say it's like 60 pages, and it's not good. It's not that good, but it's one of like the top books in atheism. He's got, let's see, right now he's got 2,245 reviews. That book is even in the library here in Nashville. Okay. And it's not that substantive. It's like the talking points that you and I hear all the time from the atheists. That's all. It's all it is. And it's just like, it's a winner, right? And my point is that it's very easy especially for academics, I think, to operate from this, whatever I write needs to be the equivalent of a paper that I would publish in Nature, right? And it's like, that's not what 99.999% of things that are published, not outside of the journals, right? They're not that, right? And also 99.999% of your audience aren't the people who are going to be reading papers in Nature, right? Or the equivalent of, right? So anyway, does that make sense?
Yes, and I want to thank you for that, because I'm finding I could probably, because it's really in my heart to generate content just that, on human nature and psychology and helping them understand themselves, I mean, really basic things like, why do we want happily ever after? We can actually connect it to the Christian scriptures. And I could just see things in church that are said from the pulpit that are just really not very empathetic. And I think I could do that. But as we were talking, it just occurred to me, I know one very successful creationist evangelist. He sends out free newsletters. If you want to subscribe, you can. But that's a nice way to stay in touch. And he'll send it maybe every 1 or 2 months. He's been very successful at this. So I'm realizing now the value of offering to give people a free newsletter.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a recognized marketing tactic too. I mean, from a connection perspective,
Yeah.
do you have a greater probability of ongoing engagement with a prospect, whether it be monetary or otherwise, if they volunteered for communication, or if you are having to place your communication in front of them without their request? And
yeah,
obviously, if they're asking for something, then at a minimum you have a warm connection, not a cold lead, right? And in the modern era, especially with the ridiculous amount of aggression, whether or not you're trying to sell somebody something or not is irrelevant to the amount of the deluge that people get on a daily basis of everybody trying to get a piece of them, right? And get a hold of them. And if they tune things out, right? We all do this. We all find ourselves tuning things out. And there's very often times when a brand that you do have a good relationship with, because you've gotten deluged with 17 things already today, when theirs pops in, even if it's not a regular thing, you're just pissed off at all of them. And it's like, delete, 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 delete. I mean, I do that all the time, right? It's you know what? Unsubscribe. Where is the freaking unsubscribe link in this email, right? And you're scrolling down to find that button because it's like, you guys emailed me 3 times this week. Like, just stop it already.
Why do you think Google 100 gigabytes is $2? Because they know you're going to pay that rather than deal with your overstuffed mailbox.
So maybe a bi-monthly or quarterly. That's reason. I mean, I know I was able to stay in touch with this individual for 15 years because he didn't deluge my email, but he's a very interesting person, and I wanted to stay in touch. I was able to stay in touch for like forever because of that.
Well, and you also have to remember too, Sal, like it's the content too, right? So even if what I'm being sent is interesting, then even if I got something once a month or more than once a month, if what I was getting was interesting, then sweet. If it's a bunch of fluffy crap that I don't care about, then doesn't matter if it's once a quarter. It's like, well, okay, it's once a quarter. I don't care, right? Like I click. Oh, what if it's interesting in here? Oh, wait, there's not. Never mind. So there's the balancing act between quality of content and frequency, of course. But if you have quality of content, and I don't mean like it has to be incredibly detailed. I'm talking about like I've talked to you about this before, right? Like all the interesting papers you find, write a short summary of the different things. So like, here's the most interesting things that I found in the most in the cutting edge of research, and just short summary. People like me would find that interesting, right? Because you're looking through papers and finding stuff and being involved in research and all that kind of stuff. Like you are somebody who is actively looking at all this stuff. So And you know me as well enough. I mean, I'm Googling stuff all the time. So it's like, if there's new stuff for me to check out and links to the papers and all that kind of stuff, like I'm in, right? Like sign me up. And there's plenty of people out there that are just like that, right? You know, you might not be hundreds of thousands, but there's definitely, the other thing to remember too is like, we live on a planet of 7.8 billion people. The probability of there being a couple thousand people at a minimum, right, on the planet that are interested in whatever it is really darn high. Hence why there's so many different markets out, or so many businesses out there like the most random crap. And it's why the porn industry, for example, is so successful, because there are a good number of people that are some kind of weird crap, and therefore let's create a niche market for it. I'm not saying we should be involved in pornography. I'm saying that the pornography industry proves my point, right? That there is always a niche demographic out there that's interested in what the heck ever. It's just a matter of finding those people and then providing content that appeals to whatever that demographic niche interest is.
And I will tell you something that I kind of discovered the hard way, that churches are actually competing against each other and other Christians. And I realized when I was trying to make a contribution to the church, in terms of what I had to offer in the knowledge, I'm realizing now they were perceiving me as competition. And so now, I've talked to some people. I said, if you want to have Christian materials, the last place you want to go through is your local church. You have to kind of go through the back door to reach other Christians, as you and I are doing right here on the internet. And that was kind of a hard lesson, because I was offering services for free, totally free, because I just wanted to serve my fellow believers. And I was getting shut down. And I was just like, okay, so I'm a professional. I get paid to study evidence and reasons for the Christian faith. And I'm offering to help teach your high school kids that are just, needing to hear this because they're going to go off to school, to university. I never got invited. And that really bothered me to this day. I said, I was offering this for free. And it's like, I'm realizing, no, I want to protect my business model and my brand name. And then in some churches, it's a personality cult. It's built around the pastor. And, I learned some pretty ugly things about how churches are run. And one of those churches, I got threatened with arrest and jail when I started snooping on their finances. So, by the way, just to complete that thought, that pastor now is facing a jury trial, and he may be projected to use $1 million of congregational money for his legal defense, because he's so desperate to stay in power.
Well, that's must be nice to be able to have $1 million of other people's money for your own legal defense.
This is a $500 million empire. McLean Bible Church, yeah, it's huge. 250 million in assets, 25 million in revenue a year. Over 15 years, this is a $500 million empire. This is no longer just like your little local church. This is serious bucks. Yeah.
Yeah, those. Yeah, well, there's a reason that I have stayed out of the quote unquote church, because I know this doesn't apply to all, and it's on different scales, but I've just observed it over and over again. And to be blunt, I feel like we are living in the Laodicean period. And
no doubt,
I think it's obvious. I also think that it is, for anybody with a modicum of critical thinking and analysis ability, if you can't see that pretty much all of the main denominations have been corrupted, infiltrated and corrupted by agents against God, then you're a blind fool. And I mean, what was the most recent split, denomination that split? Was the Methodists? Yeah, the Methodists just had their major split, right? And the Southern Baptists are in the middle of a major fracture as well. And I mean, big time, right? And their headquarters here in Nashville, right? So it's like becomes news when they have their stuff. But my point is that we're observing this in every single major denomination. It's happening everywhere. We're seeing it in major churches, and it's like, okay, what's one of the common denominators, especially with the mega church, right? To your point, Sal, it becomes about they become personality cults. And what was the reason that if you, from a scriptural perspective, having these human focal points is not in scripture. In fact, the antithesis of that is what is actually in scripture, right? Elders and the different groups, and they're supposed to have specific characteristics and everything else, like for an accountability, all these kind of things. And what we're doing, we're creating these, anyway, these power plays. And then what happens? There's all the corruption, the intricacies, the internal politics, all that kind of stuff. But then the more important factor is when they're all human, and humans have flaws, and a significant percentage of humans sin. Oh wait, all of us, 100%. And we're almost all guaranteed over give us enough time, we're going to fall for something, right? Some sin will overcome us at some point, right? And for many, especially in those kinds of positions, even people like Zacharias, right? And it's amazing to me because people put so much focus on the individual versus God, that when that person falls, their faith is crushed. And it's like, why? Why would we're all sinners in need of we're all sinners in need of salvation. We cannot save ourselves. We are in need of Christ for our salvation because we cannot save ourselves. And then it's like, oh, a human sinned. Oh, therefore I don't believe in God anymore. What? That doesn't make any sense unless you've made it a cult following, even if it's under the umbrella of some big denomination. That's irrelevant to whether or not something has become a cult inside of this smaller bubble. Anyway, enough of my long-winded diatribe there. No, sorry, I cut you out there, Jamie, too.
Yeah. So I want to say that's the business model I finally saw. That's why I said the churches, and this is, I gotta, give credit where credit is due. The atheists were saying the churches aren't about truth. They're not about evidence and reasons. And I saw that firsthand. I realized their business model is personality cults, and to get you to drop your critical thinking skills. That's why I'm finding so many Christians unable to cope with the modern world, because they were never taught how to deal with it. They were put in an environment that is deliberately structured to be insular. And if, the moment you start someone that's questioning and starts to step outside of that insular environment, it becomes easier and easier, by the way, because of the internet, etc., and the general culture. Once they get a taste of their freedom and where their question, where they feel actually welcomed for dissent, they're out of there. And it's like, it's no surprise the churches are emptying. Look at how you're doing business. You're not going to compete with the personality cults, where you have rock stars and other celebrities. If that's your business model, you got competition in the secular world. And then the other thing is it doesn't give the thing that the church is designed to do, is that's to give them the Lord, to teach them the word. In the book of Revelation, Christ, you're saying we live in the Laodicean era. The two churches of Revelation that were precious in the Lord's sight were the ones that were just faithful to his word.
Yep. Look at Acts 27. It's an interesting parallel, maybe. And yeah, I mean, all you have to do is see the successive nature of the churches in the beginning of Revelation, and to see that they've all taken place. I mean, you have to understand it in the context of when it was written to the original audience, which is obviously true. And then you can look at them as types of churches in a certain way, and then a general trend through history. And if that holds, and it does, we are the Laodicean church. It's all, but I mean, if you don't want to accept that, you don't have to, but it seems you can make a pretty strong case for that. So
yeah,
I noticed
I would
for a minute, but
yeah, I would 100% agree with you on the era the stages perspective as well. I mean, and to your point, like the description of the Laodiceans, if that's not if that at a minimum is not the church post 2000, we'll put that. If it's not, we're not at least the beginning of that period. I would say actually goes
John,
that, but if we're not in that area, it's like you're blind as a bat.
Yeah, you say you're rich and in need of nothing, but you're blind, pitiless, and naked. I mean, that describes the world, or essentially, or where it's nobody. We've never been richer, and all that. So anyway, I should have quoted the actual verse, but
no, it was pretty close. What's up, Wesley?
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good.
I just came on for a minute. I'll be gone in a bit, but I just wanted to ask you about that paper. Like, do you remember like any part of the name or something? I'm trying to find it.
Who are you asking?
LPP.
Yeah, man, I've been looking everywhere. I can't remember it. I should be in my freaking history, and it's not. And I don't remember the title. It was
something about barcodes, or did it have barcode in the title?
I don't think it had it in the title. It was in the article.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was a paper article that came out about a new paper that was it's a further substantiation of the barcoding project from like 2017 2018 that showed basically all animals, their math was 200 up to it was about 200,000 years ago, but they all basically originated at the same time from a barcoding perspective.
I think Matt from what's his name, Raw Matt, would probably know, because he did a video.
He probably would, because he does
okay,
mention...
so Matt he's in a video on the original paper that I'm referring to right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was another one that just came out like 2 weeks ago that was basically an update. It was
maybe
the
if we find the
original
paper, we could figure it out. So I'll contact Matt and see.
I'd like to see more research on the I think sometimes people are scared to face what we're claiming. If you're a young Earth creationist, like there's some really interesting examples about animals that appear to be designed for carnivory that isn't necessarily the case. Or like, I like the idea, like the ones where it's like digestive systems in certain animals, and how you can with their diet, they can literally change the way their stomach works within one generation. And or like different ways of trying to deal with like, what's a mosquito for, what's a great white shark, how do we explain that? Or insects, for instance. I think that's one I haven't heard any really good answers for. Like, what is a praying mantis? Like, what was that for? Look at what they do and what they eat. I mean, it's got to be some sort of derivative. Many insects seem to be like, who knows? I don't know. How do you guys think about that? These insects that are just, it's like a total death match.
Sure. Well, there's like trillions of species of insects, and millions, I want to say, of beetles alone. And so I imagine a lot of them are sort of, they are derivative, like you're saying.
Yeah, like the millipede, like the way the genetics, I think, form the millipede seem to suggest that. And it seems, if anything we can say is like modified, like the way that their stingers are definitely so similar and genetically to their legs. And when you consider the probably the best answer for like venom and things like that, I mean, I would guess that was some sort of digestive thing or something. Who knows? Because they have like literal syringes for teeth. It's like, how does that work? What would that be for? Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think a lot of the things, the phenotypic traits that we see, are things that are happening on the epigenome level. Probably, this is conjecture, but probably a lot of that happened during the fall, in my opinion.
Yeah, just like like what's that thing I was thinking of? Well, yeah, and then there's other ones like, like look at a parrot. Some of the parrots eat very specific diets that are, you'd think, oh wow, I mean that thing is like a bird of prey or whatever, but it really just digs and has to break like roots and stuff. And those are the most interesting cases, I think.
Right. I think there are big problems, like if we look at like as far as what kinds of things are possible to have changed with modern species compared to like their common ancestors.
Yes.
There's some things that would be really hard to change and they don't have a good explanation for, like I think turtles, birds, there's some other animals that have like circumnavigation and sort of like almost compasses in their, it's not a magnetic thing, but like they're able to basically be GPSs, locate where they are. They can wander around, find something, and then go in a straight line back to their original.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the other one too is oh man, it keeps slipping my mind, but like what was it I was gonna ask you? You made it come to mind and now I forgot. Oh, have you ever seen, I brought this up many times in the past, probably several times with SFT and other people. Someone brought it up later, I think too, maybe. But it's like a little short TED talk with Jack Horner, the dinosaur guy, and he was pointing out how like he realized like dinosaurs were like way more related, and like the ones they thought were different species, like this site, the what do you call them, triceratop, different types of what do they call them, ceratopians or whatever, and how they're just really just different. Someone was like, where's he says it like this, like, where's all the baby dinosaurs? Like they named so many that are actually the same animal, like at different stages of the life cycle. And it's called like morphing dinosaurs. And you realize that's a mistake because of evolutionary assumptions. And that could be the case with other things too, right? You see that with the gigantic versions of animals that it look like, probably the same kind.
Yeah,
things like
I agree.
that.
I think there's a good amount of ambiguity in the fossil record, and a lot of like even like transitional forms of like, like the ancient ape to modern human have a like they'll take like fossils of like young, like pre-developed skulls and things like that, and say that these are transitionals because
exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, like, depends on the lens that you're using to examine the evidence.
Yeah, that's a great example because of like there's so many factors. There's extinct species that we're not familiar with. That throws a monkey wrench in, especially if it's similar like to an ape. Then you have deformation, malnutrition, cross speciation of different perhaps derivatives of a certain kind, environmental pressure, which can cause issues there. I mean, just look how different the same species can be. And it's like we really often, I think, worry, or it's easy to worry too much because they're so confident about it, but there's so many factors that it's just unrealistic, especially if you realize like many of these appear to have actually existed or within the same general time period. So yeah,
right.
But like, what's a giant centipede for?
Oh, those things are pretty creepy.
Yeah, and they're like deadly. Like,
and the dragonflies too. Like they're bigger than birds.
Those I can understand a little more because they're so cool. But like,
yeah, they're cool. I like the wings.
But like a centipede, I've heard the genetics on those. There seems like there's like something happened and like it just repeated a genetic sequence and caused them to be like that. Something like that. I have no idea. I haven't looked at it, but I heard somebody where it's like each thing looks like it's like a genetic repeat that just caused more segments. But who knows? That could still be designed too. But I don't know. What's a praying mantis do normally? I mean, what is it for? You can't say they're all pollinators,
Right.
All right, guys. We have just crossed 3 hours, and it's time for me to go to bed.
That is good.
Why don't we do last words and then call it an evening?
God did it.
Many thanks,
Nice.
John, for having me on. It's a real privilege. I always look forward to hanging out with you. So
I
I want
appreciate
to
you
thank
coming.
the audience and who've also visited my channel. So, and it's great seeing you, and just have to keep praying that the Lord will sustain us, and He's obviously sustained you, brother. So
Trying. We're trying. Keep on
yeah.
fighting every day. Can't surrender. All I gotta say is, shall never yield to the evils of man, because ultimately I am immortal and I live and exist only by God's divine hand. So at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. There'll be a finite period where life will suck, but then I shall shuffle off the mortal coil and go walk into the eternal realm. So, it's kind of bad things may happen, but so be it. It's I guess where it is. But anyway, Wesley, you got any last words?
Not really. Actually, I emailed. I gave you my email. So as soon as you find that paper, seriously, just email me.
Okay.
Because I'm anxious. I'm anxious to find it. So, and also, yeah, God bless and thanks for having me on again. And
I appreciate it. You're welcome, and always welcome to come on in. Well, everybody, I appreciate those of you who survived for 3 hours, 5 minutes, and 58 seconds so far and dealt with the minimal level of dumpster fire tonight, much more reserved and good conversation. And, as you contemplate things you've heard tonight, the things that are running through your mind, things you have been curious about and gone to discover, and as you learn more and more about the underlying facets and necessities for your very existence, as I always say, make sure the end conclusion you reach about what was required for all of this to come into existence, make sure that your conclusion is logical, plausible, and probable. Have a good night, everybody. Appreciate you.